Okay, go ahead.
Testing, testing, testing. Okay, we're good.
Get started.
We'll deal with it.
Okay.
We got it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We are recording there. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. This is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. My name is Mike Wickers, Mayor of Cottonwood Heights. We're going to start with a review of our business meetings for this evening. I've asked our city manager, Jared Gerber, to give us the pledge of allegiance, to lead us in the pledge, rather. We've got city council committee reports tonight. I'll do a citizen comment period. And then we've got 4 legislative action items for the council to consider. And so we will start with consideration of ordinance 420, amending chapter 9.05 Cottonwood Heights Code of Ordinances concerning nuisances and their abatement. Chief Russo, do you want to give us some background on this?
I would, and then if I miss anything, I'm sure Shane will tag team or correct me. As you know, the code enforcement officers work under the direction of the police department. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about priorities in the retreat, and Ms. Helen said one of her passions was, the code enforcement issues. But I think everybody at the table would agree that that's a priority. And I get more calls on that. People are more passionate about someone not keeping up their properties than various things. And I have 2 officers, they're busy all the time. We start at the lowest level. So if someone's not in compliance, we work with the planners, are really good in helping us, and we'll knock on the door and try to find them some help. Sometimes, they're older and we can find a church group or a volunteer group and we can get taken care of and they'll come into compliance. Other people are a little more difficult. And we escalate it, and we eventually get them into court and charge them. But then there are those who that doesn't even display. There are laws in the city. One of them, I got a call from Councilmember Newell, and it's in Miss Highlands District, and it's just not far from here. And the guy collects junk. If you put garbage out on the street, he goes over and decides what looks like a trophy and it's up in his front of backyard. It collects rats. He's 80 years old. We've charged him no fewer than 17 times the criminal charges. We physically arrested the man and brought him before the judge. The judge put him in jail for 3 hours and then he's out, and not one word has changed. So we have a couple houses like that. What Shane helped me do was clean up the ordinance, which is what you're voting on today. I hope you get a chance to look at it. What this does is provide another avenue, gives us a tool in our toolbox to abate the issue. So we can serve them, in essence, give them a period of time to come into compliance. They won't. And then we'll send officers over to keep the peace. We'll get Matt's group, and we will go in there and we will clean up the property and throw it in the back of his pretty trucks that he has in my parking spaces, just by the way. And then we will send them a bill. When they don't pay the bill, there's a mechanism to lien the property, and then we can move on. And the neighbors will be very grateful that finally, after all these years, I wish Matt were here. He had one home. It sat there for years, and it was a trailer. Finally, we had to press it a little bit for them, but the trailer's gone. The people were excited. They were thrilled that he's the greatest thing in the world. You'll find that too amongst your constituents. You can have a drug house or a drive-by shooting, and they won't be as passionate as somebody who has weeds in their house. So anyway, that is in essence. I'll let Shane speak to it, but police department supports it. We'd like your approval, and there's still time this year that I can probably grab 1 or 2 of these houses and get them done and see how it looks. Questions?
I have a question about the general nuisance language. I know that we adhere to noise nuisance through the Salt Lake County code, or their standards. But is there a reason why noise does not appear as a nuisance within our list of what we acknowledge as nuisances?
Well, I don't believe it's in this section. It's under because what we did is we adopted the health department standards on that type of thing. which is pretty much uniform across the valley, because Salt Lake County Health Department serves the entire valley. And we use their standards, so they're uniform and we have the best, they're the experts. And to answer your question, it is a nuisance, we just address it differently under that ordinance.
Because it is something I get from my constituents. They literally, one of them got me on the phone. They said, see, watch what happens. So they called into code enforcement and then they had a menu to choose from. And if it was noise, you know, press 4 or 5 or whatever number. And then that put them in a queue where they got to, after a long period of waiting, another automated message from Salt Lake County, and it said, you know, you'll hear something, and then they didn't hear anything. It's an area that, and I'm not saying that we can get into a big discussion at this meeting, but noise is a big problem for people that live in District 4, not just from Wasatch Boulevard, but from other sources. And I'm very interested in seeing what we can do to elevate the ways in which we discourage vehicular noise. It really is from mostly from vehicles moving on our roadways inappropriately or unmuffled. And I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I would kind of like to see it listed as a acknowledged nuisance, and I guess need another time to understand why we don't list it as one of the, you know, primary nuisances. I mean, you just explained to me it goes through Salt Lake County. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, I think. And it was because of some of the motorcycles and engine brakes, and I had an issue, and I did talk to you too. And it's difficult because it's not constant, and there's no way to actually, you know, find out the sources of that noise. By the time officers are in the area or you know, code enforcement, they're gone. And we have to count on those standards that the county has put into place to be able to monitor those things that are continuous. The periodic nuisances are going to be a very difficult thing.
Well,
for us to
it's
deal
been
with.
proven to be very detrimental to the health of people.
Well, we
that live
understand
around
that. We understand
So
that.
but you know, maybe the discussion is ways in which we can place signage. I mean, what I'm seeing in other cities, whether it's in Salt Lake City proper with Immigration Canyon or in other cities, they'll have prominent signs on the side of the road that says noise ordinance enforced. Now, whether they can really ever enforce it or not, you know, there's things that I would like to see the city do to discourage. Because it's become kind of known that if you want to go fast and you want to make a lot of noise and all that, if you go on SR 210, you're like good to go. So anyways, I just want to go on record that it continues to be one of the primary problems that I get from my constituents in District 4, especially if they live anywhere on either side, east or west of Wasatch Boulevard,
May I
SR
make a
210.
suggestion? I've actually put a bug into Laurie Stream's ear that this noise ordinance at the county has not been updated since 1980. And that they might want to have the health department look at that again. They might need to do a formal request as a city council, right? So it's just not one voice, but maybe a unified.
Yeah, maybe
voice that says-
decibel readers on the roadways or something that
Whatever it is, they just
records
need to-
what level. I mean, it's the level of decibels that wakes you up out of a sound sleep is what's going on. Okay.
So, yeah, as far as,
Thank you for letting me.
no problem. As far as noise, we have a noise ordinance and it's just so I think we have our own separate noise ordinance. I don't know if it needs to be in this
But it refers to
specific.
the county ordinance, which
Correct.
almost every city does. And so that's why I would like the county to look again.
No, I
Health
agree.
department.
Yeah,
I
thank
agree.
you.
And I
Put that
think
on
we're
an
all,
agenda At some point to just say, let's put a resolution together and ask them to address it.
yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for Chief on this?
Thank you.
What the ordinance does is tries to conform our approach to abating nuisances to the approach that the legislature enacted a year or two ago, requiring some additional noticing and cure periods and the right of the landowner to clean up itself, clean up the property through its own contractor rather than being required to use a city contractor. So I went through the chapter 11 of Title 10, which is the inspection and cleaning portion of the Utah code, and did my best to conform our process with what the legislature wants to see done. And, so what I came up with is before you.
Perfect. Thank you. The next item for tonight after that ordinance is item 5.2, consideration of resolution 2024-55. I'm gonna read this real quick, but then we're gonna actually discuss this item under a staff report. So resolution 2024-55 is providing for a special bond election on November 5th, 2024. To submit to the qualified electors of Cottonwood Heights, Utah, a proposition regarding the issuance of not to exceed $30 million general bond obligation bonds for the purpose of acquiring and improving land, including prior bond carrying costs for the same, providing public open space and amenities, pedestrian improvements, and other needed infrastructure to facilitate economic development, community events, and activities in and around Cottonwood Heights proposed town center at approximately 2300 East and Fort Union Boulevard. Providing for the posting of a notice of public hearing and approving the form of and directing the posting of a notice of election and the ballot proposition and related matters. And like I said, we'll discuss this in more detail in just a few minutes. Item 5.3 this evening is consideration of resolution 2024-56, approving entry into an interlocal cooperation agreement with Canyon School District concerning school resource officers. Chief, tell us about it.
Yes, they sent us back another redraft, but that just had some procedural changes, and they came into compliance with some language that the legislature had passed, was it last year?
This last session.
So, but the meat of it for us was their 5-year contracts, and we have SROs, school resource officers, assigned to the various schools, one at Brighton, one at the middle school. That person also is in charge of the DARE program, so they work in the feeder schools. You know, I guess a discussion for another day is if we want to approach them to, for a third officer, you know, for security and to work in the feeder schools. But this one is about money. The last 5 years, we started at 40,000 per SRO that the school would reimburse the city, and it escalated to 45,000. With the changes in the wages to police officers and the cost of providing that service, it wasn't representative of what it actually cost me to put the officer in the school. And although, you know, they get the lion's share of the benefit of it, the truth is, if they weren't there, we'd still have to provide the service. So it's a mutual agreement. We have a good relationship with them, and there's really been never any rubs. It was just about trying to be fair and get market value for them. So what we've negotiated, and this is a deal that we did the heavy lifting on it because it affects Sandy, Midvale, Draper as well. So Unified, Draper PD, and Sandy PD. The escalation moves that from 45,000 to a reimbursement of 75,000 for the officers for each officer, and then it escalates over the 5 years to a total of 80,000 at the end of the contract. So it's a respectable amount, and we support it, and it's fair.
Thank you. And I would add that the school district was great to work with and recognize the increase in costs as well. So questions or comments from the council? That's all good news. So thank you, Chief.
Sure.
The last action item for this evening is consideration of resolution 2024-57, approving an appointment to the Architectural Review Commission. So Jared, tell us, our city manager, Jared Gerber, sorry, will give us a background on that.
So this is just a recommendation to appoint Jesse Allen to the committee. Jesse has 17 years of architectural experience, served 2 terms on the planning commission, a little bit of time as the chair as well. So we think he's a good fit for this committee. That will bring us up to 5 regular members, 1 alternate, and I think we still have 1 vacancy after that.
Great, highly qualified. Any questions? Okay, perfect. And then we do have, so we've changed a little bit how we're doing this from previous work sessions. The consent calendar is a little unique. We didn't get it noticed. So we won't be approving the minutes from our previous meetings, but we do have 2 other items that we're gonna add to the consent calendar that we will vote on as a council later this evening. The first is item 6.1, approval of travel by our CHPD officer Lance Best who will be attending a training conference for the city's Versaterm software that is in Niagara Falls, Canada. And anytime somebody goes out of the country, that has to be approved by the council. The next item is item 6.2, which is approval of travel by myself and Councilmember Holton to Incheon, Youngsugu, Korea to establish and formalize sister city relationship. And we will discuss that in more detail in a staff report. But so both of those items will fall under the consent calendar to approve. Any questions from the council? And then anyway, so it was, and then we'll be done with this evening. So we will move back to our staff reports. We have 6 different staff reports to discuss this evening. First being, we've discussed in previous sessions, the proposed health coalition committee. And Mike, I don't know if you want to introduce Whitney and Alyssa, or but are we going to bring them up?
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna take 15 seconds. The council has requested that Salt Lake County Health Department staff come in. Whitney's been here before, and Lisa, I believe, has as well. We'll invite them up, come on up. And they're here to, I think they have a few slides they want to run over quickly, and then here to just answer council questions that have come up at previous work sessions about this health coalition and frameworks and how this all works.
Great.
Let me get
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for inviting us here. We're
Yeah.
happy to be here.
Whitney, you've been here before, right?
I have.
And have you, Alyssa?
I haven't presented to you guys. I was supportive when
Okay.
Whitney came, and I've had several meetings with Mike and Sam, so
Okay,
happy to be
great,
here.
great.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, Mike asked us to come mainly as a response to council asking several different questions about community coalitions and kind of advantages of coalitions. I know that Whitney's presented, and so I don't want to spend too much time on a lot of the details. I really just wanted to address some of the questions Mike's brought up that you guys have had, and really just open space for you guys to ask your questions. We really want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable and have the knowledge and education to move forward if that's what you choose to do. So you can go ahead and advance the slide.
And it's good to address these questions up front, so they're all valid questions and concerns.
So this is probably a site you guys have seen before. These are various, what we call community-centered, evidence-based prevention. So I am the program manager for the health department, Salt Lake County Health Department, and I manage the block grant, the federal and the state prevention block grant. A lot of those stipulations is that everything that we do has to be evidence-based, right? There has to be substantial research behind the effort and the strategy that will have positive outcomes.
So I only want to interject. I know our time always gets limited, and we often run out of time for questions. We all had the presentation, and I know we're really excited about working with Salt Lake County, and it's data driven and all that. And I just was looking at the information that you provided that seems to be focused on the communities that care, CPC. Right. But I think that if I'm not mistaken, one of our goals in relation today is to understand the differences between choosing a healthy community coalition versus the CTC versus, what the options are. So I only wanted to make sure that we're all on the same sheet.
So these are the different frameworks.
So if we actually go to the next slide.
Our whole presentation is about explaining the differences between these frameworks, so.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So everything that we do, all of the coalitions that we focus on, we want to encourage them to follow what's called the strategic prevention framework. The coalitions that we focus on and we highly stress based on the evidence supporting the framework is Communities That Care, which has over 25 years of evidence supporting it. It comes from SDRG's, the Social Development Research Group out of the University of Washington. They house the Communities That Care program, and they're continually doing research, and they're still following this youth that started this program
25 years ago. So the youth are now my age, mid-30s, but they're following those youth longitudinally to see what outcomes they have when they first went through the CTC process when they were in middle school.
But it's focused towards youth health and behavior problems.
Yeah.
That's the evidence that.
So yeah, so we can,
Community.
yeah, so later in the presentation, we kind of talk about why we focus upstream. So,
Well, I don't think any of us disagree. We understand prevention and how important that is. I thought what we were gonna get into today was, I thought that there was other models. All three of these appear to be based on, in essence, youth, preventing youth from getting into problems later. Am I misunderstanding that? I mean, when I read these three descriptions.
yeah. So there's actually, Mike, I have a video. If you go, it's the prevention science video. If you click on that link right there. So the state put together a primary prevention video, and I really like this video because it explains when we talk about youth, why we focus on youth. And it's not just that we only care about youth. It's that when we're talking about prevention, right, we're raising adults. So we want to focus on upstream risk and protective factors, which means we have to focus on something before they even start those behaviors. So these can be environmental strategies. These can be focusing on parents who raise youth. These can be
Employers who
They-
employ youth.
So are we getting this presentation today because the staff has already chosen the CTC program?
So part of that, and I have that in my presentation, is that we released an RFA. The RFA was released outlining all of the stipulations that the funding was required. Staff applied for the RFA, received approval, and part of that approval process and eligibility process was they needed a statement of support by the mayor. And we're assuming, I mean, we didn't require it by council, but by the mayor, everyone had to have support from the mayor. And so that was part of their application. So they were awarded the funding. Now the grant has not been distributed yet. The contract hasn't been finalized, but they have been awarded the funding. And part of this understanding is that there's a hang up between the city and the staff, or the council and the staff, as far as, moving forward with that contract if you guys want to actually accept the funds. So there is a stipulation, and I know one of the questions Mike mentioned is that if you choose not to go with CTC, do you still get the funds? Part of the RFA process was there were.
You go to that slide.
Yeah. If you go to,
One more slide.
is it one more? We're not going in order.
Oh, I've got it on a different,
Sorry.
no, you're good.
Oh.
That's it. What am I looking for?
The
Oh, this
RFA,
here.
right
Right
here.
here.
So these were some of the eligibility requirements. It had to be a geographic based location. It does not have to be a city based coalition. It just has to be a geographic based coalition. Many of our coalitions that we do have are city based, but that does not have to be the case. Some coalitions, and I know there are questions about how other areas in the county do it. I'm just going to throw out examples. For example, Murray's coalition is not housed at the city, it's housed within their Chamber of Commerce. We have coalitions housed by nonprofits. And so it doesn't have to be a city-based coalition. So it has to be a geographic-based coalition, so which means you have a specific community that you're focusing on, which cities often default to, right? Like it makes sense for a city to apply. It has to be prevention focused, which means you do have to focus on upstream factors, right? Whether they're root causes, those could be social determinants of health. Those could be substance use risk and protective factors. Those can be shared risk and protective factors. If you're talking about ACEs and trauma, suicide, mental health, any of those types of things, those are all called shared risk and protective factors. There has to be dedicated coalition personnel, which means that we know that coalition work often gets thrown onto someone and then it kind of falls by the wayside. It's often given to a person within an organization or within a community or even volunteer that cares about this work but may not dedicate time to sustainability, right? This work is not as easy as it sounds and it takes a lot of time. So part of our RFA was that you had to have at least a 0.5 FTE, and Conwood Heights in their application did say they would hire a half-time staff with these funds, and personnel is an approved cost for these
So
funds.
I think what we're trying to understand in our meeting today is what options there are in terms of format other than the
Right.
CTC, which is focused on prevention
Right.
for youth. We, as some of us have done a little research on this, we see that, for instance, West Valley City has a
Right.
coalition that has their out and about program. And it encourages people to get out, meet with each other, walk and, you know, get out in the fresh air, get exercise. So they have things that are for all multi-generational. And I think what we're trying to examine today, please correct me if I'm wrong, and my council colleagues, but I came into this meeting thinking that we were going to talk about, you know, should we back out, I guess I would say, of the RFA process and want to take a step back and examine, you know, why as a council, we want to see this come to the city. And maybe we'll all agree that, and then we'll continue on down the path and fully accept this $72,000 and apply it, you know, I understand that helps to cover the. But we'd also like to understand what other grant opportunities there are. Should we want to form a coalition that is, allows more flexibility, I guess I would say, still prevention oriented, but a little bit more for multi-generational.
Yeah.
Should we talk about what West Valley is
Yeah.
then?
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear, if you guys choose not to do CTC, I did speak with my district attorney who has to approve all of our RFAs and our contracts, that because part of our RFA was like, you guys, that based on CTC, because you guys itemized CTC within the application, there were bonus points attached to that, right? And so certain applications were scored higher because they itemized which framework. And we did that because we are encouraging CTC based on the sustainability, the framework, the best practice. So that is why we did that. Yeah.
You know, a question for you is, you all do this day in and day out, and what moves the needle? I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of programs out there,
Right.
and I think we would be most interested to better understand what really moves the needle. This sounds like a program that's trying to impact people's lives. We have a lot of things that we do in our city, a lot of departments and community events that we do to impact people's lives. And so I guess I would ask, not knowing the intricacies of what you all do on a day-to-day basis, what does move the needle? And are you focusing on CTC because you feel like that is really making a large impact? And I guess that's where I would look to you as experts to better understand of, okay, there are these programs, where should we focus to move the needle in the biggest way possible to make positive change in people's lives?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. I would like to ask, should we be the ones
Sure,
to be
absolutely.
moving the needle? And when we first had this presentation in early December, I think we were thinking about other community goals besides just substance abuse prevention. There are a lot of programs that do that.
Yeah.
And so in addition to this, CTC, you get what you measure. And so CTC people are gravitated towards that because it's got a lot of measurement tools. But is that right for us? And should the city be engaging in public health? We're not public health experts.
Yeah, that's a
So
fair
to your
question.
point, you said it takes a lot of time. Do we want to mire our staff down in this when there's already so many other youth prevention programs out there? Is this what we should be focusing on? So
Yeah.
let's take Councilmember Burrow's questions and that, and Councilmember Holton's in general as we have this
Sure.
discussion.
Yeah. I do, Mike, is it okay if we show the video? Just because
Up to the council.
yeah, it's just a 2-minute video.
Yeah, for sure.
No, for sure.
I feel like because it kind of creates some more education foundation behind what I'm trying to share.
Are there any other cities that have done something similar to what we're looking at? I mean, that have not done CTC?
Yes, so we have several communities, about half are following a CTC process, and mainly because funding is a barrier. If you choose not to do CTC, that is great and fine. West Valley has chosen not, at this time, not to do CTC. They're still exploring options. They have chosen not to do it at this time.
Were they able to get any grant funding for their coalition?
I don't know all of their funding streams. We do not provide them any funding. They do have Get Healthy Utah funding, so there's other funding
How much is
options
that
out
funding?
there. It's like $5,000 to $10,000, and it won't sustain a coordinator. It won't sustain someone to do this work.
Well, and I understand, like, when I talked to the city manager in Midvale. Midvale is having youth violence problems, and it's
Right.
on the rise, as you know. So for them, it was a natural to go with a CTC that focuses on prevention. You know, in the city of Cottonwood Heights, perhaps we're fortunate, certainly we have drug problems. The chief advises us of that regularly, you know, fentanyl and other problems. But I think that council member Highland is, you know, making the point that we want to make sure that if we already have successful programs that are working in our schools in Cottonwood Heights, you know, is this something that we really want to? Although I'm understanding right now, the staff has chosen a number of staff people to come to the monthly meetings. I understand that in other cities, that's not the norm. And so I do think it, as we are advancing it right now, it is gonna encumber the staff. I mean, our communications director and others are on that list, you know. So I feel like our meager staff trying to, you know, sustain and do the things they need in the budget, you know, I have a real concern. I don't want their time to be taken up in this coalition. When I was championing this in February at our council retreat, my goal was more to see what things like what, again, West Valley City is doing and others that help to enliven all the generations to have their optimum health.
Yeah.
And
Senior wellness, we have a lot of seniors.
yeah, and we don't have a senior center, so, you know, I was trying to look for that, and I really saw this as much more citizen driven. So I just look at the structure that we seem to be going down with city manager selecting, you know, who's going to be on the committee with council approval. I mean, this is really not going in the direction that I had.
So let's watch the video, Mike. Let's
Can I
do that.
address that?
Yes.
So up front, when we're starting the coalition, it has been more of like the staff helping out and getting things organized. But that's why we have set aside the funding for the part-time coordinator, and they would do that work. That is their job. They aren't, I mean, I guess they're part of the city, but that is their designated job. So it really wouldn't take away from anyone else. And the goal would be for any coalition, whether it be evidence-based or like a West Valley coalition, is we want the coalition to mirror our community.
Well,
So we would recruit resident voices. The goal is to have residents be sitting on that.
you know, right now, almost 40% of the people on the roster are staff.
Yeah.
They're employed by the city. So that it would be quite a turn to go from the direction that we're going in to.
That's just the goal.
And I think
That would
that's
be
just
cool.
because they're trying to get it off the ground. Like you guys
Yeah.
have been trying to do a lot of work to get it off the ground. Best practice is that you guys have representation. As you talk about community, right? You want community makeup. We want representation from all stakeholders, not just city. We want representation from schools, from government, from
Business.
healthcare, from business,
Youth.
from youth,
Parents.
from religious organizations and nonprofit organizations. You want the community to come together. And that is why a community-based coalition is, whether you choose, whatever framework you choose, is a way to mobilize community for community change, right? Regardless of if you're trying to, you know, get a political act resolved or, you know, change behavior or even address just one specific issue, right? A community coalition mobilizes. We have found experience as well that CTC coalitions are more sustainable. They have set aside funds for personnel, whereas other coalitions have not. During COVID, almost all, with the exception of West Valley, of our non-CTC or evidence-based coalitions dispersed. And so we've spent a lot of time since then bringing them back together and getting areas up and going to find things that they care about, right? And it's not just, when I say substance use prevention, that is because it's prevention money, and I'm like not gonna lie about that. It's prevention, it's focused on substance use prevention. But we go upstream as far as risk and protective factors. There are a lot of research with risk and protective factors that can connect housing, economic stability, poverty, like racial discrimination. There's family connection. There's connection to our seniors, and
Which all affects mental health and
Well,
well-being and community.
I don't think we're
well-being.
exempt as well from substance abuse in our community. It may not be as high as some other
and I do
places,
have
but
some
we're
slide,
not
a
exempt
slide.
from it.
No.
To your question, where should it be? If it's at a chamber or other community group, I think that's a fair, legitimate question. But it's a worthy issue that needs to be addressed. Where it's addressed, I don't know. But it sounds like the discussion today is, are we going to accept these CTC funds or not? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm understanding,
And I
right?
will say with CTC too, I know there's a lot of concern of it being youth focused but there's also room for having other work groups that are like physical health, noise pollution. You can have different work groups within the coalition so that you're still getting the funding, but you're also addressing other issues that the community has shown in the data that needs attention.
So
That's what I
CTR,
was gonna tell
Yeah.
you. I know that most of the times when you have these types of coalitions, you can coalesce around other.
Yes, like Mike Burns has like a
Yeah.
physical health work group, and so they work on like physical and mental health.
Magna United also has, so Magna has their main CTC coalition, but then they have, I can't remember what they call their physical health arm.
Yeah.
That's focused right now on
Magna in Motion.
Magna and Motion.
So you got to check the CTC box and you can expand from that.
Yes,
So CTC.
But you got to,
it's a framework. It's
Yeah.
not a program, it's a framework which just drives the work. So
Yeah.
it just sets the foundation of like a solid foundation of you have this board, you have voting procedures. It just kind of organizes things, but also there's a different way to do it. You could do it like West Valley, there's just not funding attached. But
There is-
either way,
yeah.
it's really what works best for your community.
Or we can let it go to another organization.
Yeah, no,
The city isn't the place.
I mean, when I heard that it was done at a chamber in Murray, I immediately thought that, it wouldn't be a terrible idea. Who wants the
Yeah,
video?
it's just a 2-minute video.
See what y'all say.
I've got some.
And I know our, the coalition, if you were part of this coalition meeting, they saw this video.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
We
this,
won't do the full, are we doing the full video?
The audio's only working on my here.
I think you have to click something.
It is at the time when you share it, it's a checkbox.
No.
Share and then reshare.
One of the things with our community here is
Share sound?
we
Share sound, yep.
underestimate the impact of preventive resources. We don't talk about it enough. And in youth,
Welcome to the
going on in families.
Primary Prevention Training created by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. This video series will give you the tools you need to join us in working to increase the well-being of everyone in our state. In this video, you'll learn what primary prevention is and how it plays a crucial role in creating healthy communities. So what do we mean when we say primary prevention? Primary prevention strategies are things we do to prevent a problem from ever occurring in the first place. We also call this the upstream approach to prevention. This is different than midstream approaches, which are things we do to mitigate a problem, and downstream approaches, which are things we do to treat a problem after it's already happened. Let's explore this more using a commonly used analogy involving a river. A man and a woman were fishing on a riverbank when they saw a woman struggling in the current. They rescued her. Soon they saw a man struggling. They rescued him too. This continued all afternoon. Finally, the exhausted pair decided to go upstream to find out why so many people were falling in. They discovered a beautiful overlook along the river's edge without any warning signs or protective barriers and realized that this is where people were falling into the river. The couple went to community leaders to report the number of people they had rescued and explain the connection to the unprotected overlook. Community leaders agreed to install a protective guard and post warning signs. In doing so, they shifted the strategy from a downstream approach to an upstream one. In turn, this saved resources, energy, and lives. Now, as you're thinking about how your work might fit into this analogy, here are some examples of downstream, midstream, and upstream approaches. Downstream approaches include chronic disease treatment, maintaining criminal justice systems for perpetrators of violence, and providing critical services for mental health. Midstream approaches include modifying unhealthy behaviors such as tobacco use, teaching adolescents healthy relationship skills, and early screening for diseases such as cancer. Upstream approaches can look like housing and economic support for individuals and families, childhood vaccinations, access to healthy foods for children, teaching children social emotional learning skills in schools, and providing community parenting classes. It comes down to this. Downstream and midstream approaches are far more costly than upstream approaches. Upstream approaches might cost more in the short term, but can realize huge cost savings in the long term. This not only includes monetary savings, but more importantly, improvement in quality of life and lives saved. The ultimate goal is to reduce the need for downstream and midstream efforts and shift resources to more upstream approaches over time.
So primary prevention, as you talked about, is focusing on upstream, right? We're investing in our community. I think that's why, so some of the examples he gave of upstream approaches, some of them did focus on children, right? Like parenting classes, there were, but some of them were economic, right? Housing stability. What we do in our support of your coalition, whatever you guys decide to do, the Salt Lake County will support you. We will support you guys in whatever your decision is. And that is because we do feel that coalitions should be community-based. Salt Lake County is not going to come in and do the coalition for you. So, but we do feel providing the best technical assistance is educating you on best practices. And CTC, CADCA, Coalitions Light, those are some best practices that you can utilize. What was I saying? I got off track.
I thought it was good. Whatever you were saying was.
Yeah, thank you. I was sounding professional.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have other examples that coalitions do to get upstream?
Yeah, so if you want to go to this slide, Mike, that has the map. So it has, I have a map of all of our, like where all of our coalitions are and what are CTC and what are not. And I can give you examples. The map is not in there. But I can definitely share these slides. So Central Ninth Youth Coalition is a CTC. They're based out of Spy Hop, which is a nonprofit organization downtown. Their community that they focused on is East High School Cone, which is just from East High down to Glendale, right? So you know, you were just talking about cones, right? Like feeder cones. So that is one way kind of we identified geographic areas. So they only focus on one area in Salt Lake. They have a youth coalition, so the youth are the ones actually making the decisions on the coalition. But they do a lot of youth prevention as far as building up protective factors and giving youth skills to be able to succeed, separate from their Spy Hop, which is media arts and classes and outreach and stuff. So they have their youth coalition separate from that. Midvale, you guys talked about Midvale. Midvale and Magna right now, they have a federal grant related to criminal justice and youth violence. So gang and violence for youth is something that they are focusing on, as well as some shared risk and protective factors due to depression and substance use. Right now, Magna is implementing youth services programming, as well as they just got a Parents Empowered grant where they're giving out bike helmets because of that Magna in Motion, right? They noticed a lot of their kids weren't wearing helmets. So that's kind of where they partner in those two groups to kind of create activities where they can meet both needs. Let's see, My Kerns, they are our longest running coalition within Salt Lake County.
What is the DFC?
So DFC is, it comes from CADCA. CADCA comes out of, it's a federal CDC level.
Is it considered a CTC?
No. So DFC focuses on environmental strategies. Some of that is
What does that stand for, DFC?
drug-free communities.
Okay.
I think that was on a previous slide too, and I'll make sure you guys have the slides if you guys want to look at them again. So CADCA is an environmental strategies. They focus on policy. Earlier, Ellen, you were talking about signage related to noise pollution, right? Putting signs up, that is an environmental strategy. So educating the community about something. So they're focusing on environmental strategies related to substance use and less on programming related to substance use.
Do you
So
have a
there's
Coalitions
really two.
Light example?
So Coalitions Light, we just finished our pilot with Bluffdale and Mill Creek. Coalitions Light was a pilot that our department created in response to coalitions that may not want to follow a CTC process.
Well, now it says there Healthy Mill Creek is a CTC.
It is.
That's the name of their
So-
coalition.
Coalitions Light is kind of a stepping stone to CTC. It's kind of like a mini CTC.
Seems pretty
And-
flexible from what I read.
So, I mean,
You want me to take it? So
Yeah.
Coalitions Light is based off the strategic prevention framework, and it only goes through an assessment phase. So if you look at the strategic prevention framework, it starts with capacity building, assessment, implementation, and planning, and then evaluation. It does not go into the evaluation phase, and it doesn't go into implementation. It stops at the assessment phase.
So do they have funding for Coalitions Light?
So they just finished the pilot, and so they do not have continual funding through Coalitions Light. They both applied for the CTC RFA, the same one that was written here, and they both are moving forward with CTC.
and I will
The
say,
opioid grant for 70,000?
yeah. So I supported the Mill Creek Coalition when they were going through the Coalitions Light process. And the reason, well, and as well as Holiday, and the reason Holiday didn't just go with CTC out of the gates is because they didn't have the funding, they didn't have the capacity to do a CTC, and so they needed more resources, they needed money, and they needed funding to hire a part-time coordinator. So that's why they were able to go that route after they did Coalitions Light. After
And
securing
who
that
is
funding.
has the framework for Healthy Mill Creek? I mean, is it staff driven?
So-
How does Mill Creek do it?
So Mill Creek is part of the city. They started off as United Way, if you guys have heard, historically has the Promise programs. Both South Salt Lake and Mill Creek came from this
Yeah.
Promise program. It's kind of doesn't really work as a Promise program anymore. It kind of fell apart, both South Salt Lake and Mill Creek, and both are now picking up as CTCs to find more sustainable ways to move their coalitions forward.
I still don't understand. Are they have city staff
Yes,
support both
Yeah.
in South Salt Lake and Mill Creek?
yes.
So
Yeah.
Councilmember Holly, why don't you go through some of your questions?
Well, okay, the thing I want to start with first was goals. We haven't as a city defined our goals, so it seems like the cart's in front of the horse here.
Yep.
And I wonder if we need to step back. And we had that one meeting in December, we didn't really define what it is that we're trying to do with this health coalition. And I would say to all of my council colleagues, we have a lot of irons in the fire right now that are really important in our city. And I wonder if this is the best timing for us. I'd love that there's this, little carrot right here dangled in front of us of a grant. But I would question first whether that's something we want to pursue without having already defined our goals. And I would ask you, what happens after this one-time annual funding?
So I'm gonna go back to your first question and then I'll address the second part. So I want to reiterate that every framework that we encourage, regardless if it's CTC or anything, the strategic prevention framework is process-based, which means we don't tell you what your goals are. You guys tell you what your goals are.
Which we have not done yet. That's
Right,
my point.
which is
So
part of
that's
the
part of the
process.
process. It's part of the framework.
Yeah, so if you guys look
You
in your
build that
milestones.
committee,
Yeah, you look in like the milestones and benchmarks, which is why we guys wanted to show you this, is that if you look in phase.
That's a good time
3,
to look at your milestones and benchmarks, and you will see all of these are written out, like it's a kind of a roadmap of like, okay, we look at our data, we look at and then we figure out what our priorities
So
are.
you're giving the funding for a staffer to go
To
through
do
this
this
process.
process.
It's
Yes.
process-based and we
Is
just,
it council or committee that decides the goals?
it's the coalition, however you guys define the
We decide.
coalition.
And that has to be decided
We
still.
decide we decide that framework.
So-
You decide the
yeah.
voting process and procedure, you
It could
decide
tur-
who's on the
It could probably
coalition.
be a recommendation to the
Yeah.
council, then the council decides, or you give it solely to that
Exactly.
group. It's up to us completely.
That's okay. But just to give you some examples of how other coalitions have done it. So I came from Layton. I live in Layton, so I'm actually part of my own local coalition up in Layton. The Layton Coalition, the city is focused on suicide. So the mayor said, we care about suicide. Layton actually doesn't really care about vaping, alcohol, marijuana, like they don't care about that. They care about suicide. So they started a CTC. So I was part of the beginning process of that. She brought in key leaders similar to what Mike and Sam are doing now. And they said, this is what we want to do. And she said, start a coalition. So we have a key leader board, which has very many, like it has the chief of police, it has school board members, it has health department representatives, it has cities, fire department, right? It's got those key leaders and they meet weekly. But they said, we don't want to be the ones making the decisions. We want our community members to be making the decisions because not a lot of the city staff live in Layton, right? They wanted their community members to make the decisions. So the coalition board chose to have their chairs, and they have a chair, vice chair, and a secretary as their executive board, as well as 6 work group chairs. And they are the voting board. And then if it has anything to do with fiscal money, anything over 500 needs to be approved by the key leader board, which is kind of that
And
executive.
that framework exists under CTC.
That's a CTC. Another example is North Davis CTC, which is Bountiful. They chose, the key leader said, we want the voting. So the coalition, the ones meeting monthly and doing the work, they get to advise the key leaders, and then any voting that goes on within the coalition.
So what are
key
the best
leaders
practices
advise.
for selecting committee members then?
So we
Or
advise,
coalition members?
yeah, we advise on key stakeholders. We actually just encourage coalition members.
How are they selected? Who selects them? A city manager?
Yeah.
A board?
The
group?
community board,
The
so
community
who,
board
selects
who
them.
we have, it can really, so really we, Mike and Sam have kind of started this. They're the catalyst of this. And so from here, we
We're
recruit,
the
so we,
catalysts.
so we,
No, they are the
We have
catalysts.
made recommendations. You can disregard all of those. The council can
Yeah,
decide. We can set it up however
it's
you want.
really up to the coalition. So what the coalition will do in their meetings, so they're working meetings, and we'll have Post-its around the room and we'll say, okay, who is missing, what voices are missing from the room? And the goal is to get all 12 sectors, like Elisa has been talking about, so like fire, police, parents, youth, schools. We want to get everyone, all those voices, and so we'll ask the coalition what voices are missing and have them, you know, make suggestions, and that's, I mean, there's no.
Ask the coalition. Who selects the coalition members?
So in the.
Because it's been
yeah.
proposed that we codify that the city manager
Yeah.
selects those coalition members. I'd like to know best practices
Yeah.
for selecting the coalition members.
So we have in phase 1, it's called like a catalyst. We call it a change catalyst, and it's just whoever's interested. It's really in buy-in. It's who is interested in this process. We call Mike and Sam the catalysts. They're the ones that are bringing this process in. So I would say in the beginning, it's the catalyst who gets to say, like, who wants to be a part of this process. But I think best practice is that if you guys are the fiscal agent, you guys get a say too. You guys get a say in who is involved in this coalition. There's no bylaws yet. So
I think what they're saying is, the answer is, you can do it however you'd like.
Exactly.
So
And
it is up to
However,
us.
every community does it differently.
And what Mike is saying, since you just said it, I think it sounds like we decide.
Can I-
If we do it, it
Can I
sounds
ask a
like we
question,
decide.
Mike?
Yeah.
Do you, so under the guise that we hire a part-time FTE for this position, does staff feel as though this would in any sense be a burden upon current responsibilities?
With a 20-hour-a-week employee, no, that can provide the support needed. With the membership, we can set that up in the ordinance. We recommended following the same appointment process that all our other boards and commissions do. If you'd like to change that, we certainly can. The ordinance is not required to start this process. We don't even need to do that if you don't want to do that right now.
Okay.
And if you want recommended membership approved by the council, we certainly can set it up that way. That's up to you.
Is there any qualms with that approach?
No,
Yeah.
actually, I like that better, that we're not gonna codify it before we know what we're actually doing and what our goals are. That's why I said, I think we're putting the cart before the horse, and I'm uncomfortable with that.
I will say too,
I don't
with
think that's the way to go.
the CTC model and hiring the coordinator, they are trained, because I'm talking about, like you guys are worried about taking time away from city employees. We train them, they get trained by the CTC trainers, and then it is my full-time job to support that coordinator. So it really doesn't take that much time away from like your city employees.
And
Answer
answer
that
didn't
question.
answer the question about funding and what happens annually.
Ongoing.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
have.
so
So
we don't
this-
set this up and then we don't have.
Oh,
funding.
so thank you. Thank you for bringing that back. This grant specifically was 3 years.
So it's 70,000 for 3 years, so it's a total of 20.
Yeah, and so I actually brought an example of the contracts. So you guys can read it if you'd like. We are actually proposing an increase from 72,000 to 92,000 because of the increased funding that the state has received. This only encourages sustainability. It could possibly, change the capacity of doing a part-time to a full-time, depending on how you guys.
What other things can you spend the money on? Because I know employment you can. Are
Yeah,
there,
personnel, travel, like training, any of the coalition, so swag, like if you want to promote your coalition.
Food for meetings.
Yeah, food for meetings. There's not a lot of restrictions as long as it's coalition based, right? It's
Yeah.
got to go towards the community and the coalition.
it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we should probably decide just in general if this is something we'd like to do. It sounds like there's enough flexibility here where we can change some of those parameters or focus on goals or how people are appointed. Sounds like that can still be done. But we should probably just have the overarching question, it sounds like, is do we want to go down that road or not? And then we'll figure out the details along the way, as long as we're not codifying anything necessarily today, which it sounds like I'm getting nodding heads, so it sounds like maybe we're not, I don't know.
My questions have been answered and I'd be in support of moving
Yeah.
forward. So if there's two others.
I still have a few clarifications.
Can I go back to the
Yes.
sustainability piece? Sustainability is actually very important for us. This funding is for 3 years, and I want to give you a forecast of what's moving forward, at least in my field. The opioid settlement grants, which is kind of the beginning of these funds, the state has 18 years of funding. They gave our departments within the state, the legislation gave us 3 years to show outcomes. And so it's, okay, well, we've got to get outcomes. Some of those are process-based outcomes, like increasing coalition work within the communities, as well as activating community members, having them, be part of the process. So we have certain reporting measures that go with that we report back to the legislation. So this is for 3 years. After the 3 years, if we show that we're getting some process-based outcomes and then start to get some of those behavioral outcomes, then they will release the rest of the 18 years of funding. So 15 more years of funding for our areas to sustain these coalitions. The DFC, we brought up DFC. DFC is actually gold standard in kind of coalition-based. My Currents has received it. It's $125,000 a year for up to 15 years. And you kind of, every 5 years, you kind of just not apply. It's not like a full application. It's just basically saying that we have continued support from our coalition, that we want to keep doing this. And so that's CDC funding. So My Currents has that funding they're on year 8. So as far as sustainability, that's a sustainability piece, as well as because of the shared risk and protective factor approach, where it has shown to reduce multiple outcomes. Suicide funding is going toward coalition work. Get Healthy Utah requires that you have a coalition, not that you focus on substance use, but that you have a coalition to get Healthy Utah funding. And those are going to cities, Utah leagues of cities and towns here. So I see progress towards this effort and sustainability of this effort. Part of our technical support is finding grants for you guys to apply for that meet your priorities and your risk protective factors. So that is part of our technical support. But as far as this specific funding, it's good for 3 years. So it'll,
And when is the date, the deadline that you would need to know for 2024? Is it next month? Is it October, November?
so the funding, it technically started July 1st and it's reimbursement funding. So once you guys hire a coordinator, then we could start sending those invoices. The contract hasn't been signed, so
July 1 to July 1.
July 1st to June 30th. So we're on a
If we started
fiscal year.
around Christmas, it'd go to June 30th.
Yes.
That would be a first year.
Yeah, it would be
technically.
first year, and you'd essentially lose 6 months of funding. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So if it was
It's
72 or
prorated.
92,000 is prorated, it's
Prorated
month
based
to
on when
month.
we start, when we sign the contract.
It's an
Yes.
up to amount.
Yes.
It's a reimbursement amount,
It's a
up
reimbursement.
to $72,000 per year.
So you just said 61,000.
No, that's.
So I have in this
I
contract,
was about to say that too.
in this contract, we have the 92,000 or 94,500 in this contract.
Hmm.
Your guys'
That's
application was actually 72,150. When
So
I,
extra money's there.
so
Yeah.
extra money is here for you guys.
Still enough
We
to
can
do
just
it.
adjust the funds. But we've set aside additional funds for our CTC coalitions due to some state funding being moved around.
So this is what I'll say just for me is I think I feel comfortable moving forward under the caveat that it sounds like the council, we all need to have some additional discussions on what we want this process to look like and what the focus is. My gut is telling me that I definitely I want us to have some oversight. I wouldn't love having the group kind of just run off into some focuses that maybe aren't quite focused into what the true needs are of our community. And so if we can have some of that oversight to make sure that we're focusing on the right things, I think I'd be comfortable at least putting some framework in place.
And processes.
Yeah,
That's-
all-
We also.
all
consider
included.
that. They're not codified today, accept the contract. And then start the process with some council guidelines.
Yeah, and if we can't come to an agreement on those things, I don't know. Speaking of process, I don't understand the full process over here, but if we can't come to agreement on what that looks like, then I don't know if you can drop out or whatever, but.
It's up to us. I'm sure we can come to an agreement.
And I'm in agreement. I think this is something that's important for our community and the impact will be really received well. It's difficult for many families to know all the resources that are out there. And this is a catalyst for us to be able to share resources, to even guide them to other resources that are available through Salt Lake County and the state to get these services. So this is just a landing place, in my opinion, to be able to start pushing stuff out there and better serve.
I think the what matters most to me. I think that if I was in South Jordan, it sounds like maybe they're not doing CTC, they're doing something else here.
Yeah,
But I know that Harriman High, right there was a massive suicide problem. I think if we had a problem to that degree at our high school, which I know we have. But those are, I mean, look, if we have teenagers who are committing suicide and that's something that's a huge problem. Absolutely, I think that it's our role to try to do something about it, even if it's showing some social fabric for them to feel like they belong. The what matters most to me, and I don't know what that what is today.
That's why we'll look at the data. We'll look at the data and we'll figure it out from there.
Just so you know, in 1 year, we don't advertise this, but we have 5 here.
Yeah.
They're all youth.
yeah.
Yeah, it's unacceptable.
And
Yeah.
the drug problems, we've seen it at our high school here.
You want to
Number
go
of
through
times the
the
waves that
slide,
have gone through.
And after the coming-
data driven slide.
Exactly.
So the what is, we need the process, Suzanne, and the appointments and the what, those all need to be discussed.
We did
So-
just gather basic data, and I know that substance use isn't something that you guys are super concerned about. But based on your Brighton High Cone data, I can't share numbers here, but I can share your youth binge drinking is higher, rates, not numbers, but rates are higher than the state. Youth, their past 30-day marijuana use is higher than the state. The past 30-day alcohol use is higher than the state. Youth reporting moderate depressive symptoms is higher than the state, and the state is 68. 68% of youth reported moderate depressive symptoms, and your guys is with higher than that. High risk factor of parent attitudes favorable to antisocial behaviors, meaning, so that is a risk factor. That last one is a risk factor, saying that parents are showing that their attitudes are okay with some of these behaviors.
Is that specific to high school boundary? Is that what
This
that
is Brighton High School, which is Brighton High School and the feeder zones.
So like Butler, Albion.
Wow.
So this is specific
Butler.
high school cones. So again, I can't, based on our MOU with Canyon School District, the coalition could see this data based on the process that we have with them, the MOU with Canyons, but
That data comes from 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders every other year. So this is from 2023.
so this is the SHARP report, and I know that we don't only just look at the SHARP report as far as data. This is just one piece. But as far as just talking about, we're highlighting kind of the needs that you guys are seeing in the community already.
You know, the state right now, we just came out with a report from the Department of Health and Human Services on the impact of men and boys. And a lot of this data is reflected there as well. We tend to put our head in the sand in some of our more affluent communities with these types of issues, and they are prevalent. And a lot of times the parents don't really want to utilize the resources because they are concerned about privacy issues.
Stigma, social stigma, and so they try to be
Exactly.
private.
So, and then it just continues to grow. So this is an opportunity for us to lead out on something that says, look, we're here for you. We're all part of this community. We want to share, we want to make sure that we're headed down the right path and providing resources for you to be able to overcome some of your apprehensions.
Well,
Yeah, I agree.
and I really appreciate everyone's comments that have come forward today. I think a challenge that remains for me is that the catalyst should be key leaders. I mean, when I read in the website that there should be 3 key leaders, that those 3 key leaders should be residents or include.
So that's the type
people-
of framework that we can create. So,
Okay, so that is that, so
I don't
yeah,
wanna
so as long as I understand that the council is not gonna go down the path of what has been presented for codification. I just don't think that we can have, as much as I really appreciate the staff, no one here is trained in public health. And our key staff don't reside in the city of Cottonwood Heights. So I think this needs to we need to give thought to who we invite on this coalition. It shouldn't be the same people that are already serving on citizen committees. Bring people in, bring in Audrey Pines, bring in people who haven't had a chance to have a voice in our city. Right now, all the roster is made up of people who either already serve on committees or already have a voice.
So we've got that. So we are under agreement that we will work on a framework for that. So let's move. We've got enough people to move forward to sign the contract. So thank you. That was
Thank you.
unbelievably helpful and
If you could have
informative.
mapped out that conversation, I don't know if you could ever do that, but thanks for getting us there.
And I want to formalize that these types of conversations actually do happen a lot with coalitions. This is kind of a boring side of coalition work, I guess, is this having consensus. You guys know because you're council already, but having regular volunteers come together and not have that experiencing of how do we come to a consensus as a coalition is actually an integral part of community-based work. And so these conversations are normal, and the questions you guys are asking are vital towards the sustainability of the process.
Awesome.
Thank you for.
Thank you, Wendy and Melissa. Appreciate your time. Okay, we will, we're gonna move to item B under staff reports, which is a general obligation bond parameters discussion. So I think that this isn't gonna take too long because I think we've discussed in pretty much detail the specifics that we want to go for. So we're gonna turn this time over to Mike. Is that right here? Scott.
It's 6 o'clock. I've got-
So
Thank you, gentlemen.
just to recap kind of, what we went over in the last council meeting. So currently, how this is set up is to be a $30 million bond, or no more than $30 million bond. Could be multiple bond issues. It doesn't have to be all at one time. No more than a period of 30 years. It's actually 31 years because it gives you a year of leeway. And then the bonds are structured to be able to pay debt service over a period of the 30 years, like I said. We actually got updates in the packet I had sent out that it was $137.16 per the average household of 770,100. We just got new market rates yesterday at the end of the day that dropped that to 134.89. And then on a business, it would take it from 249.36 to 245.28. They're not huge changes, but it's a positive change because we've seen interest rates drop a little bit in the last 2 weeks or so since we last got our numbers.
And that's before anticipated Fed fund rate cuts.
Yes, we do anticipate additional cuts before we would actually do the bond, so these are not necessarily rates that we would get because the bond would be sometime after January. We wouldn't be able to close prior to that. Probably we would initiate the first set of bonds sometime between January and June, I would guess. But we would, there's other things that would have to happen prior to that. We are entitled to be able to use up to $10,000 of bond money to go towards different things that we could incur prior to initiating those bonds. Some of that is our debt service on our existing.
You said 10,000, 10 million.
Sorry, 10 million, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. But we could use up to $10 million of bond funds. And so we could spend the money prior to obtaining the bond, including money that we've already spent in this current year, up to, which we know by January, we will have spent about 1.5 million on debt service on the existing set of bonds on the existing property that we've already purchased. We might have additional costs that we incur prior to then as we do different things that we do, enter into contracts with different development partners and other things like that. So it allows us to pay for those things and then recoup that through the bond. So there's not a negative impact on our general fund trajectory as we incur costs that we could potentially occur through that process. I don't have a lot of other updates to give you. If you have specific questions, I might be able to answer them, but I don't have a lot of other updates.
Council?
Well, last time we talked about, we're trying to sell this as, hey, this is going to generate a land lease. We're going to be able to actually, maybe some years not even have to assess this property tax. When we do those land leases, can we constrain the repayment so that we don't have a council? I think there's a perverse incentive here for a council to just say, hey, we're getting this money. Why don't we spend it somewhere else? And instead of actually following through on the promise of we're going to repay ourselves first and then we'll add to the general fund. What constraints can we put in place to make sure that happens?
The future council is smart with money,
So the future council says, hey,
Yeah, for
we've got
sure.
this, right?
They can, yeah, that's true. They can make whatever decisions really they want. I think the understanding, Councilmember Hyden, and I think that's a really good question, is that land lease revenue, in my mind, is the purpose, one of the purposes is to offset future tax increases, which is getting the money into the general fund to run our city. And so I don't know how we would restrict with language.
And in some way, sorry,
Go ahead.
Based on it being a general obligation bond, the main restriction is that the city, as it is authorizing an increase to property tax to cover the debt service. So at minimum, that is what the general obligation bond does.
Right.
Council The problem is you can't bind for a future council, and I think Kane will agree with me on that. So you could have a good intention to do that, and, you know, in 2 years when the, you know, potential.
In some way, you may want to
Council
give, you
changes.
may want to actually give council the flexibility that in case there is a massive downturn or something happens, instead of, you know, having to take drastic measures, you have that flexibility. You could obviously make the decision to pay down debt quicker or deal with some impending doom scenario where you've got some revenue.
She has a good thought. I mean, in times of plenty, hey, let's just not find another
Don't
place to
broke up.
spend.
Yeah.
Let's pay for the tax service this year. I think it's an awesome thought. And as long as
And what we
we
should
have
do.
good people in the council, I think that will, can and will, should happen. But I don't know how we would bind it.
Well, I think we have to be
Can.
careful the way that we word things and what we say to the public. I mean, we've led them to believe that it will be possible to pay down this debt service sooner than the 20 or 30-year commitment. And if we really can't execute on that because we cannot control the policy of future councils, I don't think we should make statements that this is what will occur, that, you know, this is likely we can pay it down in advance based on lease proceeds. If we, the five of us we can't control it. We might control it as long as we're in office.
Yeah, I don't
but
know who has said that, because in my mind, that's not, like I said, in times of plenty, if we have the ability to and have a great budget year and we can do something like that, that would be my part, but it's never been
I
my
think we have said that,
narrative.
that we'll put a net 1.5 to 2 million in the general fund through a land lease, net meaning
Yes.
we're gonna pay the bond and then net additional proceeds.
Well, the tax pays the bond.
Yeah, in
Okay.
theory.
The land
tax
lease
pays
doesn't
the
have
bond. The
anything to do
land
with it.
lease would be a contribution back into the general fund to, in essence, use as any general fund type revenues can be used. It doesn't say that it will be used for that, but one thing is due to call parameters on the bond, you can't necessarily pay it down early. You could substitute other general fund revenues to pay for the debt service on the bond and then not enact the full amount of the debt service, this property tax that you could do. But that's all that you could do.
That would remove the
Yeah,
powerful incentive.
so you need to, yeah, you need to be a little careful though too about, because I wouldn't want to misconstrue to the public what could happen into the future.
But
Yeah.
we should not say there may be years that we don't assess this.
No,
I mean,
there will always be a set until. Yeah.
well,
No.
Well, not
that we have said
necessarily.
about-
I don't know if
Each year you could make that determination,
Yeah.
but you're authorized because of the geo. The
The
public
land
has
lease could
authorized
pay the
you to
bond
be able to
payment.
do
We
that.
wouldn't have to necessarily assess
Yes.
that. We've talked about that in these council meetings.
we've
That would
talked
be a
about it.
very interesting communication to navigate with residents, why it keeps going up and down,
That's why
but,
we're saying not.
but.
Well,
'cause
it doesn't take away if we do that, then the tax increase that's coming doesn't get put off. Oh, if that makes
So
sense.
then I think we just need to know what we should and shouldn't say.
Yeah.
Be very clear, since we're the ones who are supposed to educate.
I-
These neighborhood meetings, I'd like some direction.
Yeah. And I think we need to be
You could
careful not
say
to,
that your intent would be to, like the mayor was saying, your intent would be to utilize the lease revenue to offset the future geo bond tax, you know, in essence, increases tax levy. But like the mayor said, you will face earlier than expected. You know, there was the 3 lines on the graph.
Yeah.
And you would face earlier than expected pressure to potentially do a general property tax increase. And when you already have an authorization from the community to do a GO bond, I don't know why you would want to put yourself in a position where you would maybe need to enact a property tax increase. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
There, from my perspective,
Yeah.
both
It's
are
a budget
painful.
year
It could
decision.
happen.
Yes.
Each budget year is a decision.
Yes.
it could happen. We shouldn't say that it will, or that, but I don't even know if there's harm in saying that it could.
It could.
At the end of the day, I think just as straightforward as humanly possible, because
Yeah.
there are so many details and residents need a straightforward, this is what the proposal is. And, you know, there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. We shouldn't, I don't think we should go down that road because I think you could even
potentially be misleading. We should just say, this is what the increase is gonna be. And let them make a decision.
Imagine one year if we got to do that, it would be a great.
So-
talking
And
point.
then you let them know at that point, yeah.
Yep,
So
exactly.
one thing that I wanted with our city attorney here at the table, I just want to make sure that as a city, the way that we are working to alert and educate the public, that we are staying within state statute 20A-11-1205, or is that 1203? Anyway, that's 1203, that limits what kind of funds a municipality can spend related to promoting, or in this case, a geo bond passage.
Regarding communication prior to a vote.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have any
I,
comment
I
on
would have
that?
to look at the statute. My understanding is that we can use funds to be in favor of something before the resolution or before the vote.
Well, you were both at the LPC
Yeah, or well
meeting,
before the resolution.
and
And then,
who was it at
and then we'll
ULCT that
constrain.
was saying
Yeah.
then we
we
gotta be
need,
absolutely
it's
neutral.
municipalities need to be
Yeah.
careful
Maybe you have an idea.
related
So
to.
it's educational, it's not
After the vote
persuasive.
today,
It's educational, not persuasive. That's,
Yes, I
That's
think
it.
that that's the thing we can,
Cannot
from
promote.
today on, assuming that the vote is positive later today.
It's education.
At that point in time, you can spend money to educate, but you can't spend money to persuade one way or another.
so I think you could communicate and say, you know,
Here's the
residents
pros,
have
here's
an opportunity to decide what's next. This is an opportunity and this is an opportunity. These are options, but not, you know, if you vote for this when you're just an uneducated resident, you cannot persuade.
Yeah, but I think
Just
our materials,
education.
our
Yes.
materials
Well,
show graphs of how we're
of-
gonna,
of
I mean, you know, I just.
Advocating to
Oh,
please
yeah, for
vote
sure.
for it. We
No
can't,
question.
we can't tell people, please, you know, but we can say, hey, look, here's the pros of why, of this project and then maybe here's some cons too. So I wanted to add one other thing. We've all been in discussions with lots of residents already. One semi-consistent question that I've had, well, what if you can't come to an agreement with the development partner to do what we want to do? And the answer that I've been giving with help from bond counsel and attorneys and is even if the citizens vote to approve the bond, we don't have to issue the bond. So I've told them, look, if we vote to approve the bond and we can't get a development partner to help us, develop our vision, then we don't have to, we can still turn around and sell the property. Let them do it on their own.
They're just authorizing.
So the risk isn't there. Because if we can't, we don't issue bonds. Yep, so that's hopefully something that, as you get that question a lot.
And I think one clarification, you, in your official role as elected officials, can't promote one way or another, but in your private life, mayor is not mayor all the time, but when he is in his private life, he can promote one way or another, but you've got to be careful in how you go about doing that you don't do it in your official capacity and you don't use your title.
You're not, basically, you're not holding a town hall and you can't be persuasive.
Yes.
Right.
But if a neighbor knocks on your door and says, talk to me about this, you can.
Well, and I
I am
think
not
this,
speaking as the mayor, or I'm not
Yes.
speaking as the council member.
Yes.
This is my own personal opinion.
well, the
Even
statute,
that's dangerous.
the statute I was quoting related to funding.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're not gonna put on a big party,
No, no.
hey, you know, let me give you a beverage and, you know, use city funds in any way to promote.
Resources are spent on education. So the Hillside Plaza event we're working on, September 30th is the date we've kind of narrowed on for that. Will be educational. And I would say what we've done at Butlerville Days and the town hall have been educational in nature. And we've got bond counsel and our project team to kind of check us on that and make sure we're in compliance there.
And I'm kind of with Shane. I would just caution, even if you're just talking to a neighbor, I would just
It's dangerous.
stick to education, not promotion or.
What I've done is I send them to our wonderful website. So there's
Yes.
great
Good
information
job.
on there.
It really is.
Why don't you read it and let me know what you think?
We will keep
That's what I
that
say.
neutral in education.
You're probably looking at that, or we're gonna give me other supportive, and this is what you can say, and this is what you can't say? You're really just gonna leave it that freewheeling?
I think it comes down to, you can't say, please vote for the bond.
Yeah.
You can say why it's a good
Yes.
option, and at the same time, you know, what some are some of the risks. You just can't say, you, please vote.
Hey, I
for it.
really need you to
You can
vote.
say, I believe it's good for reason A, B, and C, but you can't say,
So
please vote for the bond.
So the thing to say is, you get to decide.
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
some information.
That's great.
Okay, thank
And
you.
that's appropriate, for sure.
Awesome. So we'll do this parameters bond resolution, bond parameters resolution. later. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Scott and Mike.
Yeah.
Council. Okay, item C. During our retreat this year, if you remember, the council agreed to explore options of developing a sister city relationship with other cities. Some of the things that we talked about were, you know, the reasons to go down this road to enhance economic, diplomatic type of opportunities. You know, not a lot of people think about Cottonwood Heights when they think of Utah. And to enhance our image, our identity. And so that was one of the reasons that we went down that road. Council member Holton, with his work up at the University of Utah, found out about a really good opportunity in the country of Korea. If you don't know this, Incheon Youngsugu has a satellite campus with the University of Utah. And they are in September celebrating a 10-year anniversary with that, with the campus being there. And so Councilmember Holton, to his credit, began exploring opportunities with areas in this area that might be interested, and put together an amazing thing, you know, proposal that we're going to look at. He's had amazing conversations with lots of people, and we know at this point that there is bipartisan, not bipartisan,
No. They're partisan, like
yeah,
bipartisan.
bipartisan interest on their end to explore this as well. And so I'm going to actually just turn the time over to Councilmember Holton, who's I have to just commend him for the amazing amount of work that he's done on this. And anyway, so if you'll go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I
add to what I
appreciate
said.
when we talked about this at the retreat, I think I kind of gave some context here, and there's multiple reasons why I wanted to go down this path. One reason, you know, growing up, I love my uncle. He lives right nearby our community. He's one of the hardest working guys. He's, you know, came to this country, immigrated here, and he's been selling shoes out of his car at the swap meet on Redwood Road and does Uber Eats. And, you know, as I've continued to kind of engage with the Korean community, I found out some really interesting things. You know, there is, and you can say this about multiple groups, this is not unique to the Korean community, but obviously with my Korean heritage, it's something that I obviously have found some interest in. But, you know, they don't feel super connected. They don't feel their voice really matters. They don't feel, you know, a lot of them just need some navigation when it comes to English or running their own business and how to navigate all those things. But as I started to engage with that community, there's the Korean American Chamber of Commerce of Utah. There's the Korean Federation of Utah. And we have this great resident who lives in Cottonwood Heights and has for 30 years, who's a board member of both of these organizations. Her name's Kay Choi. And she's lives in District 1, believe it or not, and has just been an amazing advocate she's actually had multiple Koreans from South Korea travel here and has been done a student exchange at Brighton High School, and they've lived at her house and she's hosted them. And there's been this great movement, but you know, some of these other conversations that we've had with local businesses, we were talking to an investment group here locally who said that it has been one of their major focuses. They've invested $500 million, a local company here, into startups across the world. And they said to us about a week ago, Korea is a place that it's just booming and they really want to get tight in there and they want to do more business. And so there have been so many reasons of why we wanted to go down this path. I'm just going to show you. So we put this, I put this little proposal together and I ended up FedExing these packets to the mayor of their local municipality and to their staff there. So we created, well, I'll show you that in a second, but these are some of the partners that we've had. Why don't you go to the next slide? Oh, I've got it right here.
Uh-oh, is that gonna work? Do I just hit the right button?
There.
Okay.
Yep. So these are our partners. I started making some phone calls, dialing people and just asking if this is something that they feel like they would want to get behind. And I tried to share the vision. Look, at the end of the day, I understand that we're a city of 34,000 people. We're small, but we're mighty. I think we punch above our weight. But the only way that we can do something this big is if we bring other partners along and show that this is a united front. And something that I had to explain to the folks when I was doing these, having these conversations in Korea, I had to say, I know that we're a city of 34,000, but the Wasatch Front from Ogden to Provo, we don't tackle traffic, homelessness. We don't tackle any of these issues in silos. These are massive issues that we do as a united front. And so I said, let us be that advocate and that bridge to Utah for you. So we ended up getting the Utah Inland Port, which they're actually going into an agreement with this municipality that we're going to partner with, creating kind of a port relationship and an agreement between these two sites. World Trade Center Utah is opening an office in this municipality that we've been talking to. Silicon Slopes, you've got Bio Utah. The reason why Bio Utah has been a great partner is Samsung Biologics, which is huge, is headquartered right there in this Korean city. We had Mayor Jenny Wilson, Congressman Curtis, Senator Romney, Governor Cox, Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, the University of Utah, the Office of Tourism, all came in and gave letters of support. And so this packet that I actually sent over to them had all of these letters. So you've got the governor's letter, you have the senator's letter. All of these groups that you see up there wrote individual letters to the mayor of Incheon Yeonsugu, explaining why this is such an important opportunity.
No, wait, let me just make sure I understand. This all is done related to having Cottonwood Heights as their city, sister city.
That's exactly right.
So, okay, well, I mean, this is impressive. It's
You
very
got it.
impressive.
Well, here's the
I
thing.
just-
When you knock on someone's door over there and you just say, hey, we're at Cottonwood Heights, and like, where is that? I mean, most people in Korea, you have to say that we're just north of Las Vegas because they've never even heard of Utah. But they do love to gamble. We wanted to go, we wanted to show that this is our united front. And if we're going to do things that we can punch above our weight, we've got to bring some partners along with us. And so this is something, and frankly, the University of Utah and some of these partners have been over there and led delegations. And so they already have a relationship there. Let's go to the next slide. I don't think the clicker's working.
Exchange programs and everything.
Oh, yeah, huge.
With all the college students. going
So
there.
U of U Asia campus, it's not their Korea campus, their Asia Global campus is headquartered in Yeonsugu. This is their 10-year anniversary in September. An amazing delegation is going over there with the Senate President, the Governor, World Trade Center to go and take part in this celebration. And it's something that the city is super excited about. Let's go to the next slide.
Why in particular did they choose this area?
So I'll explain. So
Okay.
look at the very bottom there, that last bullet point. Stanford, George Mason, State University of New York. There are prominent universities that are popping up in this area. It's becoming, and I'll explain in the next slide of why this is happening. This is an international hub that is just primed for that type of partnership. This municipality, let me explain here. So when you fly into South Korea, you fly into Incheon. Incheon is the airport. If you put the code in, it's the Incheon airport. It's a man-made island that is just a massive man-made island where they built this international airport. But in Incheon, which has 3 million people, they break it up into various districts. They call them gu's. So it's Yeonsu is, you would call that be like a city name, and gu would mean district. And this specific municipality has 400,000 residents. It's 19.6 square miles, and there's a direct connection, or they're directly connected to the Incheon airport. Some interesting news is this next year, Utah is slated, Delta, to have a nonstop flight from Salt Lake City to Incheon, which is a further connection between our two communities. Let's go to the next slide. Something that is fascinating, and Ellen, I was thinking of you when I was putting this together, because I think you'd be super excited about this. So this is called Songdo. Songdo is a free trade, international kind of economic zone that the South Korean government identified in their entire country, that this specific zone was going to take place right there in Yeonsu-gu. All of that you see, they started a city from scratch. So a lot of the issues that we're talking about here, we're an old city, we kind of have to deal with these issues. And there's been a lot of times where we said, hey, it'd be really nice to do X if we could start from scratch, right? This is an amazing experiment that they've taken place here where they took this empty land and they just started from scratch, and they've done some incredible things. I was looking at a documentary, and a lot of their trash collection, they don't have trucks that come around and pick up a bin. It's an underground system that they're dumping it into, and it's just kind of taking the trash along, which is just fascinating that they're able to do some of these things. Their goal is to make this area specifically a international business, leisure, tourism hub for Northeast Asia, and be a place that has air and sea transportation, logistics, international business centers, financial services, residents, schools, hospitals, shopping and entertainment. They have 3 massive, theater districts. They've got, it is really such an incredible place. And the reason why we had some connections here, there's a couple reasons. One, the University of Utah is already there, so there's already kind of a bridge with Utah. This is an economic free trade zone where multiple businesses from Utah are wanting to figure out how they can do more business with this specific area. As well as, I think from our city side, they've done some amazing things when it comes to just city planning in general that I think we could probably find some insights with, and it's right there connected with Incheon. So you'll see that bridge that is kind of in the water at the very top left there. That's the bridge that connects Yeonsu-gu to the Incheon airport, which is that island that you just see on the other side. Which is, there's no question that it's not quite comparable to our little
So did
city.
you think of me because I'm on one of those sailboats down?
I thought of you for many reasons.
So maybe you were gonna say this, Matt, but one of the things about this area is the tech emphasis. That, they actually love the fact that we have the same tech emphasis. Cottonwood, you'd be shocked at how many tech companies Cottonwood Heights has in our city.
Well, you'd be surprised all the things in my proposal and presentation to their mayor and council. Some of the things that we presented, and I didn't know this until I researched it, but BMW Bank is headquartered in Cottonwood Heights. SoFi Financial Services, Square Financial Services, those collectively are, probably 30 billion. You've got now full disclosure, we're not collecting all of that. A lot of it is kind of a pass through, but Extra Space Storage is headquartered here, and they've got a $36 billion market cap, which is 3 times the size of LG, which is pretty fascinating. Breeze Airways, the Sorensen Family and Foundation, which, has a endowment of $5 billion that's in our community. You've got Peak Ventures, you've got Kickstart, there's another family that's a $2 billion venture fund. Peterson Partners, thank you. And all of these businesses are about worldwide business investment in startups. And this hub that they're creating there is one of the largest startup hubs in Asia, which is why these universities are going there, because it's this international hub, which is super neat.
I had a conversation with Peak Ventures that we were looking into this, and they got so excited because they said their exact words were, "That's exactly where we want to go."
They want to put investment dollars to try to get more connection with businesses here, which is kind of interesting.
Well, if Cottonwood Heights has the second greatest amount of Class A office space in Salt Lake County, it does seem like a good match to be able to have this kind of interaction and development.
Go to the next slide, Paula. Sorry. So I had some of our
Hello.
May I have the clicker?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Not a big deal.
There, there.
So because I wanted to be respectful of city resources, but I really wanted to show a really strong effort, I paid a designer to kind of brand this and put this branding effort together. And they came up with this logo that has our mountains and their distinct buildings. That building in the middle is kind of it's their World Trade Center for Korea. And then you've got that distinct bridge that is super unique, one of the world's longest cable bridges. And so we've tried to really put a strong effort towards blending our two communities. And some of the things that we pitched to them and why we said that this is something that could be important is, I think that cultural and community, understanding across various, minority groups, racial group, whatever it may be, and just having that exposure and doing cultural exchanges, education exchanges, business exchanges, is something that I think only makes us a better community, helps put us on the map with the Olympics that are coming here in 10 years. Something that we also communicated to them is there's a large Korean delegation that will be coming here in 10 years, that Cottonwood Heights is a hub for them and a place that they feel like they can call as a second home. And so we really wanted to show that melding between our two communities. And I thought it was a great logo that they created. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as you can imagine, Korean is in my blood. I can only speak swear words and food dishes. The swear words are what my mother called me. The food dishes is what I order. And I couldn't, the bridge and the cultural understanding and the communication with their local mayor does not speak any English, zero. So as you can imagine, and I'm not on the ground over there were some incredible partners that went out, took people to lunch. They were just purely volunteers. This individual, James Park, he has been at the University of Utah Asia campus for all 10 years. He is their director of external relations and alumni affairs. I had a phone conversation with him, and Kay Choi from our community is actually the one who started this with him, got him so excited that he started setting up lunch appointments, multiple per week, with the mayor, the council members, the administrative staff, and started pitching this. And I just FedExed this stuff over, and he just started selling Cottonwood Heights like it is the greatest place on earth, which it is.
It is.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. The reason why I bring this up is one thing that I'd like to ask my council colleagues here is, in Korean culture, and I think that Suzanne can probably back me up with this because you do a lot of business there. One thing that they've requested from me is, look, as we're having these conversations and they'll interpret. I had a Zoom meeting where I presented and Kay was interpreting the entire thing. That these Koreans are wondering, cool, this is great, you're doing this. Who are you and how are you related to this? And something that I think would be just a nice gesture back to them with all the work that they've done is to give them an honorary title. All that it would be is something like advisor to the mayor and council, something that can just show that there's a connection to Cottonwood Heights. It's not a paid thing. It's not, there's nothing other than it's okay for you to say, hey, I'm an advisor to the mayor and council of Cottonwood Heights when you go and have lunch with the mayor. I think it's an appropriate thing to do. And the least that we could do for all the work that they've done so that don't feel as awkward kind of navigating some of those waters. So I'd love feedback on that so that I can just give them that feedback. And they've just been amazing. The update on this project, we've gotten amazing feedback. There's unanimous support over there. Their council meets in October. So they're going to put forward an official kind of put an official vote in place. But there's some intermediary steps along the way that we can do, such as MOUs and other things. But they're all ready. So I'm super excited about it.
One other thing I'll add, Matt has expended a ton of his own money putting together almost all of this. We've expended almost zero city resources. And so for his passion.
It was a
to do
pretty
that
big
on
sell, and so I fully knew. Well, I'll be honest, we talked to Incheon first, okay? 3 million people, and they just said, you know, how many residents? I said 34,000.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh gosh, okay, well, look, we're 3 million, which like we're your entire state. But Yeonsu-gu is where all of that is the hub of international trade and discussions and business, and that's where the university is. And look, there's still 400,000 people, but they are super excited about it. So
I'm gonna piggyback on the mayor a little bit. You're understating the efforts that you put in here. Because it goes all the way back to when we got a chance to meet the consulate folks.
oh yeah,
And everything else, and I got a chance to meet Kay. And you had talked about this, and that was months and months and months ago. And I just commend you on this effort, and when I saw the proposal before you sent it out, it's just been phenomenal. I think these types of relationships are invaluable. It brings so much to both parties to be able to have a relationship like this, and I so appreciate
thank
the
you.
work that you put in.
I appreciate that.
So businesses here will benefit. What resources are we talking about, committee from the city, other than?
Financial side?
Yeah.
None, other than, I mean, the only thing that we would do that I think would be an appropriate thing to do, and this would not be an annual thing, it'd probably be maybe an every other year thing, is I do think to start off, leading a delegation of businesses from our community, that'd be the South Valley Chamber folks, that'd be, you know, some of our Bio Utah folks, some of these venture capital firms, anyone that feels like there's some interest that they can gain value and their ships can rise because of these partnerships. And then the other thing would be hosting them here when they come and visit and introducing them to our community. And I'd love for them to come during Butlerville days. I think that'd be a pretty fun and interesting time. And the only thing that I think would be expensed when they come here is if we hosted them for a dinner or something. We wouldn't pay for their travel. There'd be nothing along those lines.
I think that if you go back to your first slide, that for the hillside, if they put that building in hillside and they came here, they contributed to this project.
So no. But I mentioned the hillside project to them. I just said, we didn't know if it's going to happen, but I think it'd be really neat to at least have a marker somewhere in the city just to show that we've got, these relationships are important and communities are built outside of our boundaries. And so I don't know where all of this will lead, but I think that we're all innovative enough and smart enough that I think that we can bring some additional, there can be some value. The biggest thing for me was hearing feedback from businesses. This is what really, really, really sold it, was that there were businesses specifically that said they're wanting to make inroads into that area of the world to do business, and just having those relationships where they can say, hey, I'm from this city and you're a sister city, this is where we're headquartered, was something that it's not just a nicety, it's something that is very tangible to these folks. So look, we're a young city. I think Salt Lake City has like 13 or 14 sister cities. I know Tim mentioned in Idaho, they had multiple. And this is not something that we're kind of being reckless with. We're going to approach this and see if it brings value. And I'll be the first to say that if it doesn't bring in legitimate inherent value to the city, then it's not a relationship that will continue.
Well, I love, one of the things that they've communicated to you is that they don't want just signature or in passing a resolution that we're sister cities. They want to work together to create value for them and for us.
And there's a delegation that comes to Granite School District every single year, probably 100 Korean students from this specific city that come to the Granite School District for a student exchange. And they've done that for the last like 15 years. There are things that are already happening with the World Trade Center, all that we can grow and add to. So would you all be okay if I told them that they can at least have that kind of volunteer connection to us?
Yes.
Does anyone have any issue with that? I've talked to Shane and Jared
There's not a problem, Shane, with having someone to say.
No, we just, I think they would just call themselves, Korean Project Advisor, Mayor and City Council, something like that, and just clarify to them and their, and whatever communication is, that they're not being compensated, they're
Yeah.
not a city
Not
employee,
not
they're not,
acting.
they're not.
And I had that conversation. It's nothing, there's, like I said, it's volunteer. There's no decision making, but you can't do stuff like this without having somebody. It's impossible. You gotta have someone there. And they're just volunteering their time.
Well, I am very impressed and very, kind of overwhelmed because my only comment was, that I thought, you know, at our retreat in February, that we were putting, for 2024 to consider a sister, a city arrangement.
Yeah.
So this very impressive work you've done, and I can like our councilman said, it's super impressive. But since this is my first introduction, like I haven't seen any of this information, I didn't know that this was advancing. So, but apparently all four of you all were in the know on this. So my only comment is that
I
in the
wouldn't,
future,
I
would have
wouldn't say that you were
appreciated-
more in that they were more in the know than you, but yes.
Well, no, Councilman Newell indicated that he was aware.
Well, I did at Butlerville Days. I showed them on my phone. I just flipped through a couple
Yeah,
pages,
I
but
mean,
yes.
but so
I don't want you to feel like I left you out.
Well, I would only say that there's priorities that were determined in February
Yeah.
that are have been lying there, to my knowledge, with no development. They've not been made a priority. I'm going to be making that remark when we go to the text amendments that's
Yeah.
further in the agenda. So I would only like to encourage, if we're actively working on projects, perhaps that could, I would appreciate an update.
You
'Cause
bet.
I mean, how can you say no to this impressive work you've done? So I can support this.
And I'll be honest, that's why I wanted to take this opportunity. This is that update just to let folks know that I didn't want to come back and share that, you know, the door's been slammed in our face, but that there's nothing that's been agreed to other than the city has been super excited and they're ready to kind of continue conversations.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I would only say that with all our financial irons in the fire, I would probably like to see something in writing that is the proposal of what kind of financial obligation we're putting our city into, not just in this fiscal year, but in forthcoming years.
You bet.
that
And the
would-
answer,
that'd be
you bet.
helpful.
The answer to that is we're not making any commitments. The only commitment is that we'll have to have that discussion during a budgetary process and come to an agreement collectively on, is that reasonable or not? So there is no financial commitment to say that we're committing to something long-term. There will have to be, just like everything else that we do, a discussion about that and if it's reasonable or not.
And your travel costs are expected to be how much
This,
for this trip?
I'm gonna say,
Probably 10 to 12,000, somewhere in that realm.
no, not for us.
I thought it was 6.
Yeah,
Well, per person.
no, together.
And this is coming out of the council budget that
Existing.
basically
Yeah.
decided
Not
not to
new.
go to DC again, so this is actually it's already been budgeted, what I'm trying to say,
That's correct. Yeah.
Correct. Not new monies.
not new months. And we're not committing ourselves to the future months.
That's correct. 100%.
So $6,000 travel fund.
That's correct.
And is that the last slide? Okay. Matt?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
This is something else.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. That was awesome. Okay, the item D is like Councilmember Burrell just said is we're gonna have Mike Johnson talk to us about a zoning text amendment.
Thank you. Sharon, what's happening? So this is a minor, about quarterly, maybe 3 times a year, we kind of keep a log of all the the random questions we get from our permitting staff and our planning department and things where the code is not super clear. And we bring forward usually when planning commission agendas are light, just these technical cleanups, and this is one of those. This one is kind of categorized as yard elements. We get a lot of questions fairly regularly about, hey, I want to put a gazebo or a pergola in my backyard. What standards do I need to meet? Our code's not super clear on a lot of this stuff. Flagpoles, swimming pool setbacks, things like that. So that's what this text amendment proposes to just provide clarity on. A lot of it is just adding definitions for these various things like arbors. It's a landscaping element that we're not proposing to regulate, but we get questions about it, so we think there's benefit in defining it. Flagpole, gazebo, pergola, playgrounds, planting beds, things like that. So I'll go into detail on these if you'd like, but I'm just going to kind of go over this and turn it back to you.
Mike, just clarify.
Please, yeah,
So anything in blue is new?
that's what we're proposing, correct. These are all over the ordinance, so it's hard to show you this in a concise manner, but that's the intent here. So we have the first several pages are just definitions of things. Again, we get calls on a lot, people asking questions of where they can put these things. Do they need a permit? What are the standards? Some of them are pretty minor, some of them don't have clear answers. So after the definitions, I'll just jump down a few pages. To the regulations that we're proposing to address them, swimming pools, we have always interpreted to be regulated like accessory buildings, subject to a small setback from property lines to make sure they're not right on the line and, they're in the backyard. So we are just proposing to codify that they be subject to the same setback placement and lot coverage standards for accessory structures or private.
Are there exceptions? Can they apply for exceptions?
No, I mean, not really. The variance is always an option, but you'd have to prove that there's a hardship. But accessory buildings are not allowed in side yards and front yards. That we're proposing the same for swimming pools.
And why take out the definition of a swimming pool?
Because the definition's up in the definition section instead of in the middle of the ordinance in a random place. Yeah, we just moved it.
Well, regarding ADUs, an area that I would want to have a discussion on before I could support this text change is I would like to see the language related to existing ADUs. An area that was brought to my attention by a resident within Cottonwood Heights was based on her lot being large enough. So when she bought the home 8 years ago, it had an existing ADU that pressed up against the side of her backyard. And when she came to the city for a permit to retrofit it and make it viable, she was told that it would have to be raised to the ground and rebuilt in the middle of her backyard. Now, that flies in the face really of elements that we have related to sustainability and biodiversity and not disrupting. I mean, there's a lot of things that are disrupted when you tear things down. And in her case, building in the middle of her backyard would ruin, in essence, the aesthetics. The ADU has stood for many years on the side yard. And if the neighbors don't have a problem with it, it's something that seemed completely reasonable. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that we all know that we get pressure to create affordable housing units. And one of the mechanisms that supposedly that Cottonwood Heights has forwarded to the state, one of our 3 mechanisms to get affordable housing in Cottonwood Heights are ADUs, both internal and external. So if we put too much onerous requirements related to an external ADU, especially revamping one that already exists, then the homeowner cannot offer that ADU at an affordable rental cost because they've had to go to high expense tearing one down and rebuilding it in another place.
Do we exclude existing?
I don't believe this text amendment addresses ADUs at all. This is just a different.
It says accessory buildings, area of coverage, and it says right here under 3A, no accessory building shall be located in a front, side, or corner side yard area on any lot.
That's no different. That's not an update. That's no different than.
I know, and that's what I have a problem with. I think we need to really talk about accessory dwelling units.
That's
accessory
fine.
buildings.
That's totally fair. The ADU ordinance is not modified by this text amendment. We certainly can bring that back. That's a council.
Yeah,
priority
I
bring
would
back.
rather bring this back for a discussion, because again, it ties into our incentivizing people to have affordable units, and we also need to look at how it aligns with our sustainability goals.
Yeah, that totally fine. I look at that as a little separate. We would recommend adopting this to get some clarity when we get calls on pergolas and gazebos and swimming pools, because we get those almost every day. To have this in the ordinance to provide clarity, and if we want some direction on the next text amendment to pursue, we certainly can go that route.
Well, so just to be clear, does this or does this not pertain to ADUs?
No, this is yard elements. This is landscaping elements. I would have to look at what you're looking
I
at.
mean, if
here,
it was called, accessory elements.
accessory buildings.
But it
we are-
does say accessory buildings, which I believe in.
We are proposing to categorize swimming pools and large gazebos and pergolas as accessory buildings, subject to the existing accessory building standards. We're not proposing any changes to detached ADU standards in this round of updates.
All right,
Again, something we can bring back, not proposing to amend the ADU standards that already exist with this round.
okay. Well-
We are, go ahead.
Well, I won't beat that to a bloody pulp. I mean, if this only pertains to these elements, that, gazebos and this sort of thing, then so be it. But when I read through that and I saw accessory buildings, I thought of the ADU issue.
Sure.
Because I've taken a fair amount of time visiting with this particular resident who happens to be a professor of architecture at the University of Utah.
Would you mind sending us the address so we can look into it a little deeper and figure out what the.
Sure, I sure will. Yeah, I sure will.
I'd be curious to look at it.
Yeah, that'd be terrific, Jared. Thank you.
We are proposing regulations to flagpoles. This was not originally proposed by staff, but the planning commission recommended this be added in. That flagpole height be limited to no more than 10 feet higher than the maximum structure height allowed in the underlying zone.
What would that be?
Councilmember Holton's new.
Yeah, I have a brand new flagpole, everyone. Come see it and salute.
So what that means is in a residential zone, if the height's 35 feet max, the flagpole would be 45.
Okay, I'm good.
There's no standard right now.
Mine's only 20 feet tall.
How high did you go?
So anybody can have a flagpole.
Yeah, all we're
Yeah, they
recommending
can.
is they are 3 feet off
USA.
property lines.
USA.
3 feet off property lines, 10 feet higher than the maximum regulated.
Which flag?
Ooh.
We are not regulating content and what's on a flag. We're not touching it. Playgrounds, gazebos and pergolas, we're proposing to just clarify that they meet the 3-foot setback requirement for accessory buildings. We see these questions come up a lot.
The only recommendation, Suzanne, is when you get a flagpole, put the rope on the inside or else your neighbors are not gonna like you because it whips in the wind.
Rattle around.
Yeah.
And then tree houses, we don't have a lot of these. We have had, questions on these. We're proposing that they're subject to the same setback and height requirements for accessory buildings. Just 3 feet off property lines, 14 feet tall, no matter how high up in the tree they are, 14 feet would be the kind of high point. But we are not proposing that these be limited to rear yards because you can't always choose where your big mature trees are. So a tree house, not more than 14 feet off the ground to the roof of it, could be in any yard of the house as long as it meets the 3-foot setback standard for property lines.
I'm a little uncomfortable with that one too.
We-
A treehouse can be anywhere on the property? Anywhere,
So 3 feet off property lines, 14 feet tall. But again, yeah,
in a front yard.
that's what this is
Sure.
proposing.
You ever seen Little Rascals?
So
No.
just so you're aware, the definition also limits it to 100 square feet.
Yeah. Oh,
No
yes.
display, no plumbing, no electrical.
Cause haven't you seen that show of the tree houses they build?
It's not,
No habitable space.
These are your small little weekend
These are
projects.
play tree houses.
Sure, a weekend project.
Wow.
Depends on who you are.
This ordinance.
We've defined retaining walls. There are definitions of retaining walls and when retaining walls are permits in the building code. Carry that through to zoning because we get questions on it. And then you'll recall a few months ago, the council adopted some demolition standards for historic structures. We've just included a cross-reference to that chapter 15 section that was added recently into our historic structures section of Title 19. So they're cross-referenced. There's no discrepancies now. They reference each other and say it's subject to standards in both provisions. There's no potential loophole there.
Sorry, on a separate note, is the Old Mill hearing scheduled?
October, yes.
There's a
October
date in October.
10th, I believe.
Do you know what time that is gonna be?
Yeah, I sent you an email.
Oh, okay.
Usually those are at 5.
Okay.
We'll just
Okay.
finalize the procedure, but typically 5.
Okay.
So that's it. Very technical, minor changes, again, to help address a lot of the common questions our staff are getting. People wanting to do these kind of yard projects.
So, sorry, with the flag, so like a residential area, often, what's the height restriction on a
Typically
house?
35 feet
Is the house?
is the house.
Top of the room.
Yeah.
Well, I do need to say that, since we've just, now addressed a priority that was made at the retreat, there was a text amendment that we agreed to back in February related to the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan. So I would like the staff, if I have the support of our city manager and the council, to please address that text amendment, that we prioritized for 2024 related to the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan. Does anybody have a
Do you
problem with that?
remind me what it was?
It was to amend,
The bus lane for car travel.
yes, that these shoulders that we advocate for in the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan could not be used, for private vehicles during peak hours. The current language says that the shoulders can be used by private vehicles during peak hours, which then does away with the efficacy of our whole emphasis on having transit during peak winter hours. We don't want those private vehicles,
On the bus.
we preferably wouldn't widen the road that much, but we certainly don't want to widen it to induce demand with private vehicles. So that was, it was a rather simple text amendment, and I would really like to see that prioritized.
Just the master plan.
But
The master plan.
but I believe that our director has told us that this would likely have to go through the planning commission because it would be amendment to the master plan. Yes. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, if we, look, here's the thing, and I've had this discussion here, and I said, as we work on those priorities as a council, and we do make those decisions, say, hey, I'll be supportive of you in that effort. There should be some teeth to that and some things, if we all agree, should move forward. So.
Thank you.
Yeah,
for sure.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll vote on,
This will be voted on at the next meeting.
Okay, perfect.
We won't bring it back before the vote.
okay, thank you. Item E is Wasatch Front Regional Council WFRC project discussion and timeline. So Matt, we have some opportunities to apply for grants, and you're gonna help us with some ideas, and we can have our own and talk about what we want to pick for.
All right, so thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just I guess what I'll share is going to be fairly brief. We've all been through this process before. It's not a new process. Wasatch Front has not said yet that these projects this is ready to move forward, but in a meeting I had a couple of weeks ago or a little bit ago, they said this would be coming out. So I thought we should get it on the council, in front of the council before they get to the last minute. Now, that being said, we have sort of a schedule we need to follow and try to get some information from you as a council on how you would like us to proceed. The report I've put together that's in front of you right now, and I'll go through a couple of these things just to kind of show you what we're talking about, was some ideas that we had as sat down as staff and kind of kicked a few ideas around, or some things that we could possibly present as something for you to consider. But at the same time, in the report, it also states that this is along with any other ideas you as a council may want us to take back, prepare, develop, and then bring back to you for more discussion. So we have some timelines though we have to meet. The big timeline on this year is the letter of intent is due September 26th. So between now and then, we have about 3 council meetings, 2 to 3 council meetings, where we can have this discussion and debate back and forth, kind of hone this thing down a little bit and bring back information for you to review. But when we get down to that timeline, we're gonna need a nod from the council. This is not a business decision. This has always been in this meeting. You as a council kind of agree, these are the projects we want to prioritize, and we go forward with that. So today, just really briefly, if I could, one of the things I did try to do as I was sitting here, kind of reviewing these projects, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of some of the other projects. One of the questions came up, what have we had in the past few years? Really briefly, I know we're under a time crunch here, but really briefly, some projects that we've done over the last few years related to either Wasatch Front track, Utah Governor's outdoor, or state transportation alternative. There's a few projects that are out there, so I've kind of laid them out a little bit. You can see the green. This was an outdoor right here. I'm pointing to it on the screen. That was an outdoor project. That's the East Jordan Canal. We got a grant from the Utah Outdoor and Governor grant to pay for that, and we got that built. Right now, the rest of the East Jordan Canal, you see here in red, there's a grant that Mike and his crew got to continue to study the extension of the East Jordan Canal along the East Jordan Canal Trail. There you go. Oh, look at that. I got it all tied together. We also just recently received $150,000 for this blue section along Highland Drive along the west side to go through a design and property identification to improve the entrance into Cottonwood Heights, that area along Highland and right off 215, as well as look for ways to extend that trail East Jordan and moving it forward.
Talk to me about the entrance into Cottonwood Heights. Explain that to me.
The tree wells, the sidewalk, the trees, kind of beautifying at the same time, extending the idea of the backbone of the East Jordan Trail around. So we received, like I said, $150,000 for that. One of the other things we got the money, a supplemental grant to finish the 1700 East sidewalk project, which is in process right now. Another one we got through Quarter County, we rebuilt Highland Drive a few years back. Bengal Boulevard, we got funding from federal Wasatch Front as well as county to build the trail and promote and do traffic calming and improve the trail in the intersection. We are in the process right now of waiting to hear from the SS4A on extending that project down to 2700 and making that improvement. We haven't heard yet, but it's one of the applications we've made.
That one we'll hear.
It will hear at the end of this month.
Okay.
That's the rumor. That's definite rumor, maybe.
On both the implementation and the planning?
Say that again, definite rumor,
Definite
maybe.
rumor,
yes.
maybe.
Okay.
I'm gonna write that down.
Got it.
Yep. I just want to be clear in my ambiguity that that's exactly what's happening, maybe. We also have the $500,000, the other grant that we put in with SS4A to loop around 2700 and tie into our town center. We have the 1.5 million that we received to improve the intersection. We had the track funding on 2300 where we were able to surface 23 and put on bike lanes. We received a grant on Fort Union. And that
I really appreciate your zooming through this, but when I heard you say that we have 1.5 million for improving the intersection of 2300 East and Fort Union. Where did that come from?
That was in a state bill that we received. Senator
Played a big
and
part.
Greg,
in
our
It was
our lobbyist
legislatively
pushed that one
appropriated
through.
to us.
Specifically for that?
It's in the bill. It's written exactly like that in the bill.
And that's beyond the traction control and other monies.
That was completely separate, yeah.
And Matt, what's the
Very good
project that goes
lobbying.
from Bengal along 2700 up to Fort Union? What's that project?
Bengal, say that again.
From
Bengal, okay.
Bengal Boulevard at it's actually 2600 there. that
Yeah,
goes
right
up-
here.
Yeah, what's?
This is part of the SS4A we put in for a study, part of the SS4A to study safety improvements along 2700, tying in the school, tying in these schools, the rec center, and then working to tie in also improving safety from bike lanes, trails, pedestrians, along Fort Union, which we talked about, it would all tie, into the new town center area.
So
That's a study.
can we take a moment on this very important thing? And thank you for asking that question. So this, it reads Bengal Boulevard Walkability Safety Improvement. So this SS4A, this is what we paid $30,000 to have Kimley Horn in Washington DC produce this grant application. And as you can see, I've been studying it. And so I think it would be beneficial for the council to have something that is more detailed to digest. And I'm just trying to get, there it is. So that shows the project area that we are asking for over $9 million through the SS4A grant to implement, not plan, but implement. And I would like to see this, I don't know if you've looked at this, but I would like to see this in a maybe a diagram as big as this table, because are we going for complete streets? Like, what makes this a $9 million project from Highland Drive to 2700 East? And I mean that in the most positive way. It's just that I would like to understand what Kimley Horn has produced that made this compelling for the federal government to say, we're going to give you $9 million and do this. Does that make sense?
Sure, I don't, the specifics aren't out yet. We haven't gotten the devil in the details. What we've done is we've extended the what we did, and if you recall our discussions, we are in a shortfall on Bengal Boulevard. This project that we've already have right here, we're in a shortfall on funding to finish out the safety islands, all the things that we've discussed on that Bengal Boulevard and Highland, as well as the trail. So part of the SS4A was to make up the funds that we need.
Trail? I thought we were talking about from Highland Drive to 2700 East on Bengal Boulevard. So where is there a trail here?
The trail for right at City Hall
Okay,
that goes
right
all the
here.
way down to Highland.
This is what I was showing you.
That
This
blue
is
line there.
the blue line. We have a grant to complete a trail, bicycle and pedestrian trail along here for the Bengal Boulevard Highland project right here. And this is also
Super long. This was gonna create that.
Yeah, but
Brand new
this portion is not part of the SS4A.
no, ma'am, it's not.
It's only here.
Correct. It goes down to 2700. It goes
What
from,
I'm asking for is, I would like to see this blown up in something that I can understand and really look at. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I'm really trying to understand what made this worth $30,000. And so that would be one thing that to me would, be helpful to see what Kimley Horn has put into the detail that was compelling for the federal government to issue the $9 million.
Hey, Matt, remind me that red line there, that's a different, I remember that intersection in that little island there, that's gonna be redone to add
this
two
is part,
turn lanes or
this is,
something?
yes, correct. That's double left turns out of here to change this intersection to improve the bicycle and pedestrian safety at this intersection, also to install islands up through here up to City Hall, installing islands for traffic calming.
So I've had
through
a
here.
ton of people, Ellen, who from my district who have
Yes.
complained about their kids walking and biking
Yes.
through Brighton High School.
Yes.
And so I've been telling them that Matt Ship's gonna fix it all.
Well, I think it's really important that we collaborate and that we're provided with information, because I can tell you that even though this isn't my district, I've interacted with a lot of residents in this area.
Yeah.
And a problem at this intersection that I'm sure you know well, I know you live right over there, is that if you're coming out of the neighborhood on Park Ridge, on the northwest corner, there is a wall that was erected as part of the entrance, I'm sure decades ago. And it makes it so that those who are trying to get through that intersection, it blocks your ability to see the cars streaming southbound. Have you noticed that?
100%,
And that, I
but
want to make sure that's addressed as we talk about making this all safer, that we don't overlook redoing. That's really
the
important.
truth, you're not wrong with that, but the truth is that people need to stop at that light and.
But even if
and
you
look.
stop, you have to inch so far out that you're in the oncoming lane of southbound traffic by the time you can really see what's coming.
This reconstruction project, I think, was approved before this council was even
Well, it was
here, right?
started, but I think iterations keep
Look, making it safer for
advancing.
these people to get to Brighton High, I think is so critical.
Yeah,
It's the walkers and bikers,
Yes.
like for sure. So where are we, Matt? You said there's a shortfall. What is the how much is the shortfall?
We are looking at trying to make up
$9
about
million.
$1 million at this point.
So if
A
you-
million.
So Matt,
Correct.
if you
Yeah.
remember, that was the reason for the SS4A
Yeah, yeah.
grant petition to make up the shortfall and then to include other areas.
And then
It had to be like a minimum of 2 million.
yeah, we had a minimum amount, and so that was to extend, the grant application is to extend that same cross-section of islands, trails, pedestrian safety, all the way down to 2700 intersection of Bengal, which we talked about in our meeting, and improving that intersection because of the businesses there, and tying all this in with the skate park, the school, athletic fields, the rec center, the middle school, and tying all those in. That's what that funding is. That's the implementation funding to take it down to 27. That's all of that funding. It's basically extending what we have already reviewed as a council and staff to this point and carrying that cross section down through this point. And then the rest of it on the SS4A, like I said, is on a study along here.
So where does the $9 million number come from?
It's construction
For the entire,
for the shortfall through here, as well as the construction from this point, roughly right here, down through here, through this intersection. It's an estimate on cost based on a schematic, based on the schematic we presented to the council. And that's what that's about.
okay, it doesn't go north of.
No, the
27.
study, there's two parts to an SS4A. They encouraged us to put in for a study as well as an implementation, which we did. And we discussed that here, where we discussed putting in for the study to go down 2700, improve the corridor through here, for pedestrian safety. What that looks like, that's what the study's about. That's why we would be studying it.
Okay.
And then along Fort Union, which as a council, you all discussed, well, it might be a good idea to consider Fort Union because of the new town center that we're currently working towards, as well as the intersection and those things.
Yep.
I'll finish up. Like I said, we picked up the 2700. We did Ferguson Park we did, a couple of trails through here with track and all of those things. So at this point, what I will bring forward now and open for discussion, because I think that's the important part of this at this point, is that we discuss one of the projects we presented was this, which is a bicycle track, if you will. If you'll recall, we're building this section through here is already built with a separated bike path as well as pedestrian. Currently part of the 1700 East project, we're building that in between. And then there is another elevated cycle track through here. One of the proposals is we continue to take a bite of the elephant a little at a time, and we continue the cycle track down to the park. Right now, there is a flashing beacon right here. Proposal would be to extend that and just see if we can pitch the idea of getting a hawk signal put in right here to give another crossing from those apartments, that neighborhood, better, safer access to the park. That's one proposal.
So I've watched that area because I've got a lot of complaints. I think the hawk signal would be huge at that park. That is a pretty busy part of Cottonwood Heights right there in Fort Union. And people, I hate to say it, but these people blast through the current flashing light.
Or be in addition to.
No, we would take out the flashing yellow beacon. You would need to do that and then
and then you were
replace.
also gonna move it a little bit westward.
Yeah, move
so
it.
would align
No.
better with a pedestrian entrance into the park. Because if you've ever walked across that crosswalk, it puts you on a
Basically
street
in
that
a
goes
street,
down that's
yeah.
designed for cars, not for pedestrians.
sense.
So.
And this cross
realigning
is
that.
over
Do
now.
that side, that'd be amazing.
So
From the
so
apartments.
The current thing doesn't work great, so.
yeah, well, to be honest, the current one was supposed to originally been a hawk signal
Oh,
and
really?
it got shot down. And we settled, if you will, at the time.
Mm.
But, so I will tell you on this one, if I sent you or the council, and you may not, I apologize for getting it out so late, but I sent this. And you'll notice we've for the last 3 years have actually put in for a Fort Union cycle track, various parts along there. We haven't done very well. I mean, we've scored good, but there's always just enough to beat us. So keep that in mind if you want to consider this. The cycle tracks don't always score so well on Fort Union.
Just to point out though, why I like that access to Mountain View Park is because you're getting on that, if you go through the park, you're getting onto the trail system through the park, which is, you'd be thinking, why are you biking there? Well, you're biking there because you have that canal access.
Would separating the Hawk from the cycle track be worthy?
It would be something we could address. I mean, it depends. This would be, this type of project we would apply for under TAP, Transportation Alternative. That TAP program has a lot less money than say the STP program, the Surface Transportation. So it just depends, as you as council, how you'd like us to present it. The Hawk may be the way to go.
Remind me, how much are Hawk?
The one we just put in, I forget to mention that in my little fast preview. We just paid through the federal grant, $475,000.
But that was only a part. The feds paid the rest, right?
No, we paid the small part, the whole
thing's
project, the whole was 475. We paid the 6.77% or whatever that number is.
That's a good return on investment.
Oh, yeah. The other one I would
Wait,
okay.
before we leave this project, I think it's important for the council to hear the opinion coming out of the subcommittee on active transportation. This is their statement related to this project. While overall we support improving the biking infrastructure, how does this piece fit into the wider vision? Does the city or Public Works have a plan for the entire corridor that is shovel ready? If we can see this whole plan, it would help to see how these pieces will fit together to make an effective and consistent space for all users to pass. For example, is this bike lane multi-use path going to have a buffer from the fast-moving traffic on Fort Union? Lastly, we would consider adding a new sidewalk or path at Montview instead of the cost of moving the crossing light. Could the new Hawk light be placed where the existing light is? How are these decisions being made, and what best practices are being followed by Public Works to direct them?
From a regional planning standpoint, our Fort Union plan does envision a separated shared use path along all of Fort Union. So to answer that question. On both sides? Yes. That creates some right-of-way acquisition needs, which is what we're doing on the 17 piece project on Fort Union. But you can see there, that's a curved, elevated, separated bike lane. That would be the intention here. Connecting north across into the park down to the East Jordan Canal. You step out a little more regionally, that connects that whole neighborhood to a trail system, if that canal is ever extended and implemented. Holiday City has
the one in Murray.
It goes across. So
yeah, it goes all the way
what we'll
across.
see in our feasibility study is showing.
I've always wondered,
how to
I
cross that.
love riding on that trail. Getting from my house on a bike to that trail is dangerous.
And then Holiday has done a separate study of an I-215 shared use path that starts just east of Highland and carries on all the way down to Knutson Park, which connects to the Big Cottonwood Canyon Trail. So if you look out a little more long range, the planning vision here has a trail network from Big Cottonwood Canyon Trail
up for a second
to Knutson Park, along I-215 to Highland Drive, across Highland Drive on the East Jordan Canal and down into Cottonwood Heights.
Could we leave that slide up for a moment? Because as we contemplate what are the most effective things to be doing to make our cycling work. So these bases are about 3 feet wide. And as a cyclist, if these 8 foot wide concrete or whatever, some are combination of asphalt and concrete. But as a cyclist, every time you come to one of these power poles, and they are rather frequent here on the south side of Fort Union, they take up roughly half of the space. So if to make do until we can get adequate like cycle paths on both sides, every time that you come up to one of these power poles, suddenly half of that 8 foot wide goes away. I mean, the alignment is a little bit problematic.
The
I
bike lane is
question
behind the park
The
strip.
bike lane's behind it.
these power poles are in the concrete elements.
They're in the park strip.
They're in the
They're in the
park
park
strip.
strip and the trail starts behind that point. That's the vision.
Well, I
And
would
that's
just,
what,
okay, I was just there and the 8 foot swath in these new sections, this particular one appears to be outside of it, but I can tell you that others along.
the trail doesn't extend that way. There's no trail west of this.
I'll meet you on Fort Union Boulevard and we'll walk it together. In fact, I urge the council to get out and walk these areas and get familiarized.
So
with
we
these
don't have a
projects.
whole lot of time.
Yeah, we're running out of time.
So let's,
Okay, let me exit out of.
Just to
Where-
clarify too, we will put this on the next agenda to have more discussion
Okay.
during the work session, but we're gonna be bumping up against the deadline that WFRC hasn't really released yet. We kind of know where,
Well, every year it's by the end of September.
Yeah,
which we have to
so-
get the LOI out.
so I wanted to get it on for discussion today and then we'll have it on again. for the next meeting.
The other, do you want me to finish
Yeah,
three at least?
yes.
Okay, the other project that we have tossed out there or presented is Wasatch Boulevard, or the Lakai Cutoff as we call it, or Cottonwoods Wasatch. The simple proposal is extending the sidewalk where it doesn't exist, adding separated bicycle grade, and sidewalks either on the on the west or on the east side. It is not determined. And also another option you can consider as you look at Wasatch as an STP project, which is a surface transportation project, combining all that with safety elements of one of the visions that as a council you have thrown out there is traffic calming, which involves, islands, trees, things of that nature. Those are legitimate STP programs. So that is something we can consider here as well. Just an idea. So I'm not gonna, I'll let you as a council, so I'm gonna finish and then I'll let y'all kind of direct where you want us to go. The final project we thought about, we get quite a few calls on this, quite a few calls. You know that about 4 or 5 years ago, we completed the intersection on Fort Union and Highland. That intersection design, when it was built and designed, the plan worked. And after a year of this being open, we are finding ourselves with a little more volume, which is causing some more longer backups
How
than.
much more volume?
Well, I'd have to pull the numbers. It's not a huge amount, but but there have been some backups. Some days this will back up quite a bit. Other days it operates wonderfully.
It's Starbucks and it's McDonald's with people turning in and out of their left.
Well,
And
okay, so
and
if I
so-
can, to address that in this project, one of the proposals in this project, and as you consider this, I agree, McDonald's and Starbucks, those stores are causing some problems. And Chief can probably back it up. The accidents, it seems like most mornings I drive up that road, there's always a fender bender at Starbucks. But one of the things that we can, part of the proposal is extending the island as per our ordinance, which states it 250 feet, I believe 250 feet or 300 feet back from major intersections, which this is, extending that island back, which would make those stores right in, right out, which would take away the cross-cutting traffic, the stopping to inch your nose out, things of that nature. And we already have the island on the north side over here by Dan's and across from Wells Fargo. That island already exists. So that would be extending the island this way. One of the other parts of this proposal is extending and making that a third through lane. But that would require property, that would require some things that we would need to address. So those right now, and then taking it just beyond the Czech City where it turns into 3 lanes again. So this would these are 3 proposals we thought about. These are not etched in stone. They are not the gospel according to Matt by any shape. But there are things that I think as a council, you need to start thinking about and looking around, at least in your districts. I've given you a write-up of what these projects can do. They need to be on like STP, the big ones, where the big money is. They need to be on collectors and above, and they have to be identified in the long-range Wasatch plan.
So to make sure that I have understood this correctly, you're saying that we would apply for the Highland Drive under STP. Are there any others? Or just STP for that and for Wasatch Boulevard?
Could also.
Correct. We could apply, like for Wasatch, we could, if we wanted to do Wasatch as a big project, traffic calming, similar to what we're doing here, we can apply STP, and that's the bigger money, if you will, okay? If we just did a bike path or something of that nature, it could be a tap, but there's not as much money in the tap. The intersection would definitely be, we might be able to prove a CMAC, I don't know, which is congestion mitigation and air quality. If you wanted to discuss that for Highland, that's a possibility, but I don't know yet. We have to dig deeper. Once we do the letters of intent though, what will happen is Wasatch Front staff will take those and they will massage it and they will let us know your better chances applying under this grant than this grant and vice versa, and they will kind of lead us that way.
And the county has corridor preservation.
And the county has corridor preservation that we could buy land if need be, but we have to get to a certain point to identify the land we would need.
Yep.
The other one, the cycle track, would definitely be TAP money, transportation alternative, if you wanted to do that. So if you're looking at cycle tracks or trails, then those are the transportation alternative. And then the STP are roads, reconstructing roads, widening, narrowing, traffic calming, pedestrian improvement, those types of things. So once again, I would just say, as far as our timing is concerned, if we look at the agenda, the council meetings, if we follow the schedule we're on now, our last meeting would be the 17th, which is three councils.
It's only 2 away.
Two away, right. So between now and the next one, information sent, or however you would like it to happen, Jared, it can be sent to Adam and I can massage that, bring the information to you as the council at the next meeting. Y'all can review it. And then
I have to interject that I wanted a full week in advance of the next council meeting. I want full information a full week in advance so that we can all digest it, so we can have a meaningful deliberation when we come to the meeting. I mean, I understand this was an initial meeting, and I want to acknowledge you for starting this process in August instead of historically we've waited until September. So I thank you for that. But I also am asking, especially since it looks like we're going to delay and not have a September 3rd meeting, it'll be September 10th. So by September 3rd, I want to have whatever my council colleagues want to advance. I want to have that information in hand to study for a full week before we go into a September 10th. Do I have support on that?
I would just need the information because, well, the packet,
Because I want to talk
is
about
the
Highland
3rd.
Drive, and we don't have time today.
No,
right?
the meeting is going to be, we haven't voted on this, but it's
It's on
looking
September
likely that we will not have a September 3rd council meeting. It's looking like it'll be on the 10th. But what I'm asking for is that since that's 2 weeks away, please give us, the meeting packet is a different story. I'm asking for the important information about these grants. I want to have that a full week in advance. Many other councils get their information 2 weeks in advance. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for that in basically 2 weeks from today. what are our thoughts?
I mean, if Matt's okay with that, that sounds good.
I'm okay. I just need,
feedback
I need
by
the
when.
feedback via however you would like that to happen. You
Well,
know,
that's what I'm
And the
saying,
feedback is
so-
which ones to focus on, is that right?
Or if you've got
Well,
other
or if you have other ideas,
or-
we don't have,
I know, I
we don't
understand.
have to do
How long
any of
do you
these
need?
three.
Understood,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
Is my question, is how long would you need to prepare that?
You quickly need us to give you feedback so that you can provide that information.
by
by September 3rd.
next week, by next week,
So
it would
we
be
get
nice. And then I would, if you want it by September 3rd, we have got to have it by next week to be able
If
to
you
start.
get it to us by the 27th,
So by the 27th, we get
If you've got-
our ideas.
right?
Okay,
Correct.
that sounds great.
Thank you.
I also,
We'll look at stuff after that, but we may not be able to have that information by the 3rd, then if we have to do
Correct.
some work on it.
well, and I know we're running tight. We have a 7 o'clock business meeting coming up, but it's very important for me to get some feedback from my council colleagues and also share from the subcommittee, their thoughts. Does anybody have any?
Just on what direction we like, is what you mean?
Yeah, I mean.
I'll just tell you, I
as
think-
We can.
I think that hawk light to Mount View and that little bike path, and then working on Highland Drive by the McDonald's and Starbucks, and also, as you said, that entryway into Cottonwood Heights on Highland Drive, which it sounds like we
have that.
already
We
have
already
that
have
one. So that would be my only two. I can't speak for others, but it's that Highland Drive stretch and Mount View Park for me.
I'll send you. I'll send
Yeah,
you.
we're gonna have to do this after, you know,
We've got to get
yeah,
some other things done.
yeah. So,
And
so we'll let you know, Mike or Matt. Thank you.
one quick note.
Yes.
Just, I got the email today. We did receive the sidewalk completion on Creek Road that we applied for a little while ago through the state tap on 2 sections of Creek Road. So those are those 2 little
At
spots.
the bottom of Pepper.
Yeah, well, right
Upper
here,
Hill.
over here on about 2,700, and then the other one over here to finish the project between right over here on Creek Road and about close to Union
Where
Park.
that bed.
How soon can we get to
Bed and
this?
breakfast. also.
You got the funds? you said,
We
or just
got
approval?
we got it, but we still have to come back and talk about our share. Remember, this was a 60-40, so we need to come back
And
and
who
talk
did
about
that?
it.
Where did that grant come
That's
from?
a state tap, state
State tap,
tap,
which is different than.
which is
WFRC.
different than federal
Got
tap.
it,
Yes,
thank you.
correct.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
yes, sir.
So that we have a couple minutes to eat. The last item is some calendar, of our meetings through the rest of the year. So our next meeting on September 3rd, there will be 2 people from the council out of town. And so having 3 people worries me a bit. I've never done that since we've been here, you know, to have 2 people gone at the same time. And if one other person has an emergency or something during that day, it worries me that we plan a meeting knowing that we only have 3 in advance. So my suggestion has been to move to the 10th of September and then keeping the 17th meeting as well. That's the first suggestion. And then we have talked about for the past, well, at least last year, the first meeting in November is election day. That's November 5th. And then we've had some objection to holding a meeting on that day. It is a busy meeting and there's a lot going on. So I'm open for suggestions. I'm actually considering maybe moving forward with only having 1 meeting in November, which could be the 12th or the 19th. We could meet 2 times if we need to, the 12th and 19th, depending upon maybe what comes up in the interim. But my suggestion would be to cancel the 5th meeting and to either have one on the 12th or 2, one on the 12th and 19th. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up is in December, what we've done is met, I think last year we met the 1st and 2nd Tuesday as well, the 3rd and 10th, to get away a little bit away from Christmas. So as we get too close to holidays and people being gone. So thoughts, let's talk about first the September meeting moving from 3rd to the 10th.
Well, I have to say, I planned my vacation to be back in time for the September 3rd meeting. And so I feel that for my 2 concerns are the public has an awareness that we meet the first and third Tuesdays. And I think that public engagement is extremely important. And for the public to continue to see our meetings on a first and third Tuesday is what their expectation is. I'm concerned about that. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that sees it that way. I'm very open. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. Again, 3 people does create a quorum, and so I'm willing to fly back. That's September first, that's first meeting in September is extremely important. That's when we're going to deliberate on what is extremely important to me and my constituents, which is what grants we apply for. I already wasn't able to even read the comments from the subcommittee on active transportation because we ran out of time. So I want to make sure we allot, perhaps we need a full hour on this subject at the September 10th meeting. These are the kind of things on my mind. I guess I'll pay out of pocket if I have to fly back. I don't know if the council wants to pick that up, but in good faith, I bought my airline tickets and planned my whole thing to make myself available for the 2 September meetings. So I understand that Councilman Holton and Highland, planned their trips over top of those meetings, but I'd like consideration on that. Those points.
Are you able to join by Zoom on the 10th or no?
Well, I just think Zoom is very difficult to be effective from a Zoom remote. It's very hard to interact when you're remote. I've tried that twice now. It makes it really hard to communicate with your colleagues, so.
Thoughts?
I'm concerned about the 3, like you. I hope there's a really good solution here.
Councilmember Newell, what do you think?
I'm good with the 10th. I have no issues there.
I think we have pretty good communication channels for those that would and that probably follow us, and I think that word will be able to get out. So I don't have a huge concern about constituents not knowing. We can get the message out on all of our different channels. So let's see. I know Councilmember Holton was okay with the 10th. So let's I know that there's 3. Let's plan on moving that meeting to the 10th. And talk about the November. What are your thoughts about mine about the not meeting on the 5th due to the election and having 1 or 2 meetings kind of dependent upon how busy we are.
When will we make that decision about having 1 or 2? Because I'm concerned about having only 1. We just
End of I mean, I think we scheduled the 12th. And, to meet this the very next week, we wouldn't have a whole lot of time to review things and have another meeting, but I'm okay to do that as well.
What if we schedule the 12th and 19th? Is it better to have it on the schedule and cancel 1 if you don't need to?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, I would suggest that. The 12th and
Councilmember
19th.
Newell?
For the 12th and the 19th?
Yeah.
I'm good there.
Councilmember Burrell?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And then the December. So December, the thought is moving the 1st and 2nd week instead of 1st and 3rd to kind of avoid getting to this.
I have a trip on the 10th, but I can schedule that.
On the December date?
Yeah.
And which is the date, the 3rd and the 10th?
The 3rd and the 10th.
Yeah, I'm good there.
The 17th is not a problem. You think that's too close to Christmas?
That's been the recommendation the last couple of years that people wanted to move it. So I think we have both years. Councilmember Burrell?
Oh. I've already stated my opinion. I prefer to stay with the 1st and the 3rd Tuesday.
So sorry. Where did Councilmember Holton go?
Went to eat. I don't know.
Councilmember Highland, did you have a preference in December, did you say?
I prefer to keep it on the 3rd and the 17th. For the stated reason. I don't think the 17th is too close to Christmas.
Okay, well, we'll carry over that one. We'll make the changes for September and November and we'll Till we get an opinion. Thank you for that. A quick review of calendars, Bark in the Park at Mountain View Park, August 24th at 9 a.m. 9:30 rather, until 11:30. Labor Day, where the city hall offices will be closed. That's September 2nd. The block party, Hillside Plaza, date and time TBA, we're shooting for September
September
30th is what I hear. And then the block mounts for map, Friday, October 25th. From 5 to 7, and that's at the rec center. We do not have anything to discuss in a closed meeting, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our work session.
I'll motion to adjourn our work session.
I'll second that.